In the quiet corners of history, there are stories that refuse to be forgotten, stories that linger like an unsettling whisper in the dark. But what if the mysteries we thought we understood are only fragments of something far more profound? What if, hidden within the past, there are truths so strange they defy reason itself? For 3 hours, we'll journey into the unknown, confronting the unsettling and the unexplainable. From vanishings with no trace to discoveries that should have never been, prepare to question everything you know. So sit back, relax, and let's uncover the darkness lurking beneath the surface. The sea stretches endlessly before you, the horizon fading into a soft blue mist. It's a timeless expanse, an ancient realm that has witnessed the ebb and flow of countless civilizations, some long vanished, others still lingering in memory. Beneath these waters, in the very heart of the Mediterranean, lies a mystery that has puzzled historians for centuries. It is the Enigma of the Sea Peoples, a name that evokes fear, awe, and a deep curiosity about those who once swept across the ancient world. Who were these people? Where did they come from? And why did they arrive with such fury, leaving behind a trail of destruction that reshaped the ancient Near East? The records, though numerous, offer little clarity. The ancient Egyptians referred to them in their hieroglyphs as a force of chaos, a series of mysterious maritime invaders who struck at the heart of the great civilizations of the time. But their true identity, their origins, and their ultimate fate remain a puzzle, a riddle wrapped in the fabric of time. The first mention of the Sea Peoples appears on the walls of the mortuary temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu in the 12th century BC. Here, the Egyptian king claims to have repelled a great invasion. The depiction shows a horde of warriors, some with distinct long beards and others with helmets or strange, elaborate dress. These figures appear otherworldly, as if they came from a land far beyond Egypt's borders, crossing the seas with an intensity that swept everything before them. But the mystery begins to take shape when we ask, who were they? Were they a unified force or a loose collection of tribes, each with their own motivations? And where did they come from? Mainstream historical theory suggests that the Sea Peoples were likely a group of displaced peoples, driven from their homelands due to climate change, famine, or other catastrophic events. This would explain their violent push into the Mediterranean world as they sought new territories to call home. However, these explanations, though plausible, fail to account for the detailed and seemingly contradictory references to the Sea Peoples scattered across ancient texts and inscriptions. Archaeologists have identified several cultures that may have been connected to the Sea Peoples, but the connections remain elusive. The Philistines, who settled along the southern coast of Palestine, are often associated with the Sea Peoples, their origins still debated. Were they one and the same? Or did they simply adopt the name Sea Peoples in the aftermath of their migration? Their distinctive pottery and the presence of their cities suggest an Eastern origin, possibly from the Aegean or Anatolian regions, but the evidence remains ambiguous. Beyond the physical traces of their settlements, there are the stories told by the civilizations they encountered. The Hittites, the Egyptians, the Mycenaeans, they all recorded their encounters with the Sea Peoples, though often only as fleeting mentions. These civilizations were at the height of their power, yet they fell victim to a mysterious force that seems almost supernatural in its suddenness. Were the Sea Peoples simply raiders? Or were they something more? A movement, a revolution, perhaps even a cultural shift that impacted the world as a whole? Some fringe theories suggest that the Sea Peoples could have been a confederation of diverse groups, bound together by shared grievances or religious ideologies. Others propose that they may have been the remnants of older, forgotten civilizations, somehow surviving in the shadows of history. Still, others entertain the possibility that the Sea Peoples were more than human, that they could have been part of a mythic narrative, woven into the fabric of ancient storytelling as agents of chaos, bringing with them a kind of cosmic reckoning. What is clear, however, is that their presence was no accident. Their arrival at the tail end of the Bronze Age was a significant and world-altering event. Some historians argue that the Sea Peoples were instrumental in the collapse of several great empires, signaling the end of an era and the beginning of a new, darker age for the ancient world. But if the Sea Peoples were so pivotal, why do we know so little about them? Why does their identity remain so shrouded in mystery? Perhaps, like so many ancient mysteries, the Sea Peoples were not just invaders from the sea, they were the manifestation of something deeper, a symbol of the times. They arrived when the world was ripe for change, when the old order was beginning to crumble. But what lies beneath their story? What truths remain hidden, lost to the depths of the sea? The answers may never fully emerge, but the mystery persists, inviting us to look further, to question, and to wonder. And so, we are left with the question: who were the Sea Peoples, and what became of them? Their identity is still out of reach, but perhaps, like the sea itself, it is a riddle that may never be solved completely, forever drifting just beyond our grasp. Just as the Sea Peoples left behind only fragments of their story, there are other relics of the past that continue to evade our understanding, objects, symbols, and texts whose meanings have been lost to time. One such artifact lies in the heart of Crete, a small island that once played a pivotal role in the ancient world. Among the ruins of the Minoan civilization, a peculiar disk was discovered, its surface inscribed with a series of symbols that defy explanation. This is the Phaistos disk. The Phaistos disk, unearthed in 1908 at the Minoan palace of Phaistos, remains one of the most perplexing artifacts in the history of archaeology. Measuring just 6 inches in diameter, it is made of fired clay, yet its significance reaches far beyond its modest size. The disk is covered with spiraling symbols, etched with such precision that they appear to be part of a language, a script unknown to any other civilization in the ancient world. The symbols are arranged in a spiral pattern, radiating from the center outwards, almost like the ripples of a stone cast into a pond. But as much as it seems to offer, it is a puzzle with no clear solution. For over a century, scholars have struggled to decipher the meaning of the Phaistos disk. Despite many attempts, its purpose and the language it represents remain a mystery. The symbols do not correspond to any known script of the time, and while some have argued that the disk is an early form of writing, others suggest it may be something entirely different, a religious or ritual object, or perhaps a form of proto-writing that never evolved into a fully functional script. What is most intriguing, however, is that the symbols on the disk are not merely abstract designs. They seem to depict specific images: humans, animals, tools, and possibly even divine figures. Some have even suggested that the Phaistos disk could represent a calendar, a record of some sort of event or ritual, or a text of great significance that has simply been lost in the sands of time. But with no key to unlock its meaning, these theories remain speculative, each as elusive as the symbols themselves. In the years following its discovery, many scholars have proposed various methods for cracking the code. Some have suggested that the disk could be related to the early Phoenician or Minoan scripts, while others argue that it may belong to a completely unknown writing system, one that was used exclusively by the Minoans. If it is a language, does it hold a key to understanding the Minoan civilization itself, or is it an isolated form of communication with no connection to other cultures of the time? Perhaps the most striking theory comes from those who propose that the Phaistos disk is not a form of writing at all. Instead, some argue that it could be an artifact of an entirely different nature, something symbolic or ritualistic, meant to convey spiritual or philosophical ideas. After all, the Minoans were a people deeply connected to their beliefs, with intricate rituals surrounding their gods and the natural world. Could the disk be an object used in religious ceremonies, a means of invoking divine forces or recording sacred knowledge? Yet, even these theories fail to explain the most basic questions. Why was the disk created in the first place? Why such an intricate and enigmatic design? And why, after all this time, has no one been able to decipher its meaning? As we delve deeper into the mystery, another layer of intrigue begins to emerge. The Minoans were known for their advanced civilization, with impressive art, architecture, and technology. But despite their achievements, very little is known about their written language, and what little evidence exists remains largely undeciphered. The Phaistos disk, with its strange symbols and unknown origin, may be the key to unlocking this gap in our understanding. But there is another possibility, a more speculative one, that lingers in the background. What if the Phaistos disk is not just a relic of a forgotten culture, but a message from another time or place entirely? Could it be evidence of contact with distant civilizations, or even something more extraordinary, a form of communication from a lost, advanced civilization that predated the Minoans by thousands of years? Some fringe theorists have entertained this idea, suggesting that the disk could be a remnant of a much older and more enigmatic people, their language lost to the ages. While these theories remain highly speculative, they invite us to question the assumptions we have about the ancient world. Could there be other forgotten languages, lost in the mists of time, waiting to be uncovered? Might the Phaistos disk represent a piece of a greater puzzle, one that connects the civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean in ways we have yet to understand? In the absence of definitive answers, we are left to ponder the true purpose of the Phaistos disk. Was it an early form of writing, a religious object, or perhaps something entirely different? And if it is a form of communication, what message does it carry? As with so many of history's greatest mysteries, the Phaistos disk continues to elude us, a symbol of the complexities and the untold stories of the ancient world. Its secrets remain locked away, perhaps forever. The questions linger, unresolved. And as the disk rests silently in its museum display, we are reminded that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some may remain, eternally, just out of reach, waiting to be rediscovered, or perhaps waiting for us to simply listen more closely. The Phaistos disk is one such enigma. Its meaning remains hidden, its purpose unknown. But as we continue to search, we can't help but wonder. As the Mediterranean unfolds its mysteries, the western edge of the ancient world whispers its own secrets, secrets hidden for millennia beneath the quiet hills of southern Iberia. Here, in the region of Tartessos, a once thriving civilization flourished long before the rise of Rome or even Greece. But it is not their temples or treasures that have captured the imagination of historians. It is the enigmatic script they left behind, a script that continues to puzzle and intrigue scholars to this day. The Tartessian script, a series of symbols etched onto stone, pottery, and other artifacts, represents one of the most elusive writing systems in history. Discovered in the early 20th century, the earliest examples of this script date back to around the 7th century BC. Though many scholars believe it was used by the Tartessians, a civilization whose name remains shrouded in mystery, the language it represents remains undeciphered, locked away in an ancient code that has defied all attempts to unlock its meaning. The inscriptions, most notably found in the region near the Guadalquivir River in present-day Andalusia, are often brief and fragmented, yet they possess a distinct elegance. The symbols themselves are unlike anything seen in the ancient world, neither Phoenician, Greek, nor any other script of the time. The script appears to be alphabetic, yet it does not correspond to any known language from the ancient Mediterranean. Some inscriptions are written in what appears to be a right-to-left format, while others are written vertically or in other unusual orientations, suggesting that the system might have been complex, or perhaps even evolving during its time of use. For decades, scholars have debated the origins of the Tartessian script. Some have proposed that it was a form of early Phoenician writing brought to the Iberian Peninsula by traders from the east. The Phoenicians, after all, were known for their far-reaching trade networks, and they had a significant presence along the southern coast of Spain. However, this theory fails to explain the unique characteristics of the Tartessian script, which seems to bear no direct connection to Phoenician writing or any other Semitic script of the time. Others have suggested that the Tartessian script could be an indigenous creation, possibly an entirely unique system developed by the Tartessians themselves. This theory would imply that the people of Tartessos had a distinct and highly developed culture, with their own form of communication that was not influenced by the larger, more dominant civilizations surrounding them. But if the Tartessians were truly an independent civilization, why has so little been discovered about their language or their written records? Perhaps the most tantalizing mystery surrounding the Tartessian script lies in its connection to the civilization of Tartessos itself. Little is known about the people who once inhabited this enigmatic society. Ancient Greek and Roman sources mention Tartessos as a wealthy and powerful kingdom, its riches derived from mining, particularly of silver and other precious metals. Some even believed that the mythical city of Atlantis might have been inspired by Tartessos, its grandeur and eventual destruction echoing the ancient tales. But if Tartessos was so advanced, so influential, why did it disappear from history so abruptly? And why did its script vanish along with it? The end of the Tartessian civilization is typically placed around the 6th century BC, when Greek and Phoenician influence in the Western Mediterranean began to grow stronger. Some scholars believe that the decline of Tartessos may have been linked to the rising power of these external forces, or perhaps to internal strife. Others speculate that the Tartessians may have simply been absorbed into the surrounding cultures, their language and script slowly fading into obscurity over time. Yet the script itself seems to persist, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. One of the most compelling aspects of the Tartessian script is the fact that it appears on a variety of objects: stone tablets, ceramic vessels, and metal artifacts, some of which seem to have ceremonial or ritualistic purposes. This has led some to propose that the Tartessian script may have had a sacred or divine function, reserved for religious rites or royal decrees. Could it have been a system of communication reserved for the elites of Tartessos, used only in certain contexts? Or was it a widespread language, used by commoners as well as nobility? Further complicating the matter are the theories that place the Tartessian script within the broader context of other ancient scripts. Some suggest that it may have connections to the Iberian scripts, which were used later in the region, while others see possible links to the Etruscan or even the mysterious Minoan writing systems. Yet these connections remain speculative, with little concrete evidence to support any definitive conclusions. Over the years, various attempts have been made to decipher the Tartessian script. Linguists and archaeologists have applied everything from statistical analysis to comparative linguistics in an effort to unlock its secrets. But despite their best efforts, the script has stubbornly resisted all attempts at translation. Some scholars have even suggested that the inscriptions might not represent a true language at all, but rather a symbolic system or code used for ritual or ceremonial purposes. Still, the possibility remains that the script is indeed a form of communication, one that simply lies beyond our current understanding. As we stand at the edge of this enigma, the question lingers. What does the Tartessian script truly represent? Is it a forgotten language, waiting to be rediscovered? Or is it something more? A symbol of a civilization that exists only in fragments, their language and culture lost to time? The more we uncover about the people of Tartessos, the more elusive they seem, slipping further away from our grasp. The Tartessian script, like so many ancient mysteries, is a riddle that refuses to be solved. It is an artifact from a civilization that once thrived in the shadows of history, leaving behind only these cryptic marks as a testament to their existence. As we continue to search for answers, we are reminded that some mysteries may never be fully unlocked, leaving us with more questions than answers, and a sense that, perhaps, the greatest secrets of the past are meant to remain hidden. In the heart of ancient Italy, long before the rise of Rome, there was a people whose influence would shape the course of history, yet whose language remains a riddle. The Etruscans, who once thrived in the region we now call Tuscany, left behind a rich and mysterious legacy, one that is both fascinating and frustrating. Their cities were advanced, their art exquisite, and their religious practices complex. But the true enigma lies in their language, an ancient tongue that, despite centuries of study, remains largely unintelligible. The Etruscan language is perhaps one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of ancient history. It was spoken by a civilization that flourished between the 8th and 3rd centuries BC, a civilization that predates the rise of Rome by hundreds of years. The Etruscans were known for their sophisticated culture. Their cities were centers of trade and art. Their influence stretched across the Mediterranean, and their religion profoundly impacted the early Romans. Yet, despite their prominence, the Etruscan language, written in a script derived from the Greek alphabet, remains an enigma. While the Etruscan script is relatively well understood in terms of its structure and form, the language itself refuses to be cracked. Inscriptions can be found on everything from tombstones to pottery, but even after more than a century of research, the meaning behind many of these symbols remains elusive. How is it possible that a civilization so rich in culture, so influential in its time, could have left behind a language that no one can fully understand? Unlike the more familiar Latin or Greek, the Etruscan language does not belong to any known language family. It is not Indo-European, which places it outside the main linguistic groups of the ancient Mediterranean world. Some scholars have suggested that the Etruscan language is related to other ancient languages, such as those spoken by the peoples of the Caucasus or Anatolia, but these connections remain highly speculative. Despite these theories, no conclusive evidence has emerged to demonstrate any direct relationship to other ancient languages. The script itself is also peculiar. While it is often written from right to left, like many early alphabetic systems, the Etruscan alphabet shares several letters with the Greek alphabet. In fact, the Etruscan script was likely derived from Greek settlers who arrived in Italy around the 8th century BC. Yet, despite its Greek origins, the structure of the language and its vocabulary remain completely alien to any Greek or Latin speaker. How could a civilization that had direct contact with Greek colonies and interacted with the Mediterranean world produce such a radically different language? The surviving evidence of the Etruscan language comes primarily from inscriptions found on tombs, temples, and other artifacts. The most famous example is the Louvre ostracon, a piece of pottery bearing an inscription in the Etruscan language, which has resisted all attempts at translation. Then there is the Liber Linteus, a linen book, the longest surviving Etruscan text, discovered in the 19th century. Despite the attention it has received, it too remains undeciphered in its entirety. Scholars have made some progress with individual words, but the overall meaning of these texts continues to elude understanding. As intriguing as these ancient writings are, they have not yet provided the breakthrough that could unlock the full mystery of the Etruscan language. And while linguists have made some headway, such as recognizing patterns in the script and identifying potential connections to other ancient languages, there is still no definitive key to understanding what the Etruscans were trying to communicate. In some cases, scholars have even speculated that the Etruscan language might have been symbolic or ritualistic in nature, perhaps not intended to function as a fully developed system of communication. Was it a sacred tongue, used only in religious ceremonies or by the elite? Could it have served as a secret code, a way for a select few to communicate in private? Or was it a living, everyday language used by ordinary people to converse with one another and later abandoned as the Etruscan civilization fell under the sway of Rome? Despite the lack of concrete understanding, there have been numerous attempts to decode the Etruscan language, some of which venture into more speculative territory. One of the most popular theories is that the Etruscan language was a remnant of a much older, pre-Indo-European civilization. This idea suggests that the Etruscans were the heirs to a lost people, whose language had survived for thousands of years before being swallowed up by the expansion of Indo-European-speaking cultures. Others have speculated that the Etruscan language could have been a language isolate, a tongue so unique that it defies classification altogether. There are even theories suggesting that the Etruscan script is a kind of pictorial writing system, where each symbol represents an idea or concept, rather than a specific sound. These ideas, though intriguing, remain outside the mainstream and have not been substantiated by sufficient evidence. One of the most striking aspects of the mystery surrounding the Etruscan language is the question of how the Romans, who would eventually absorb the Etruscan civilization, seemingly lost all knowledge of it. The Etruscans were not some isolated tribe, cut off from the rest of the world. They interacted with their Greek and Phoenician neighbors, and their influence on early Roman culture is undeniable. Roman religion, for instance, borrowed heavily from Etruscan practices, with many of the gods and rituals adopted by the Romans originating with the Etruscans. So why, then, did the language of the Etruscans fade into obscurity? Why was it not passed down to future generations? Could it be that the Etruscan language was deliberately suppressed? Some scholars have suggested that as the Romans expanded their influence over the Italian peninsula, they sought to erase or absorb the cultures they conquered. The Etruscans, as powerful as they once were gradually overtaken by Roman dominance. Perhaps the Romans actively suppressed the use of Etruscan, replacing it with Latin, the language of the conquerors. But is it really possible for a whole language to vanish so completely? Was the Etruscan language merely replaced by the more dominant Latin, or was it actively erased, its speakers silenced? Perhaps the most chilling possibility is that the mystery of the Etruscan language is a mirror to the mystery of the Etruscan people themselves. Did they simply fade away into history, absorbed into Roman society and culture? Or did something more dramatic occur? Was there something about their language, something inherent in its structure, that was deliberately forgotten, perhaps even suppressed, by the rising powers of Rome? The more we learn about the Etruscans, the more the language remains a tantalizing, elusive puzzle. With no one alive to answer the questions, the Etruscan language stands as a monument to a lost world, one that continues to resist our attempts at understanding. As we continue to unearth artifacts, inscriptions, and texts from their civilization, the question remains: what does the Etruscan language hold? What might we uncover if we could finally decipher it? If we could read the thoughts and ideas of a civilization that has been gone for thousands of years? The mystery persists, as deep and enduring as the inscriptions themselves, challenging us to question just how much of the past we truly understand, and how much still remains to be discovered. In the heart of Europe, hidden beneath the layers of time, a mysterious relic from the Bronze Age was uncovered. A disc of remarkable craftsmanship that has since become one of the most fascinating and debated objects in the archaeological world. This object, known as the Nebra sky disk, was unearthed in 1999 near the small town of Nebra in modern-day Germany. At first glance, it appears as little more than a tarnished bronze plate, worn by centuries of history. Yet what is engraved upon its surface, and the mysteries it holds, suggests that it may have been far more than just an artifact. It could have been a key to understanding the cosmos itself. The Nebra sky disk is a circular bronze object measuring about 30 centimeters in diameter, and its surface is etched with a series of symbols that have sparked endless debate. On one side, there are depictions of the sun, the moon, and stars, carefully arranged in a design that some believe represents a map of the heavens. There are two arc-shaped figures, believed to symbolize the moon or the horizon, while a series of smaller stars, along with a central circle, suggests an alignment with celestial bodies. What was once thought to be just another artifact from the Bronze Age has become something much more significant, an ancient astronomical tool, or perhaps even a ceremonial object designed to reflect the deep connection the people of this time had with the stars. The disk itself dates back to around 1600 BC, during the European Bronze Age, and its discovery has reshaped our understanding of prehistoric societies and their ability to study the heavens. But while much about the object is known, many questions still remain unanswered. Who created the Nebra sky disk? What was its purpose? And most puzzling of all, what exactly did the people of the Bronze Age understand about the stars, and how might they have used this knowledge? The mainstream interpretation is that the disk represents an early form of astronomical knowledge. Some researchers believe it was used to track the movements of the sun and the moon, key elements in ancient agriculture, religious practices, and navigation. The arc shapes on the disk are often interpreted as representations of the phases of the moon, while the small circle could represent the sun. The disk may have served as a kind of calendar, a tool for marking the passing of time, the changing seasons, and the important moments in the agricultural cycle. However, this interpretation raises its own set of questions. How did the people of this time acquire such advanced knowledge of the stars? The Bronze Age civilizations of Central Europe were not known for their technological advancements in astronomy. Yet, the precise alignments suggested by the Nebra sky disk point to a sophisticated understanding of celestial events, including the movements of the sun and moon that were essential for agricultural planning. How could a society, so distant from the ancient astronomers of Mesopotamia or Egypt, have developed such an advanced understanding of the heavens? Some scholars speculate that the creators of the Nebra sky disk might have been influenced by neighboring civilizations that had a more extensive knowledge of astronomy. Could the disk have been a product of cultural exchange between the peoples of Central Europe and the Mediterranean, where advanced astronomical practices were already well established? It is possible that knowledge of celestial phenomena was passed along trade routes or through contact with other cultures, but the evidence for this remains speculative. Others suggest that the Nebra sky disk was not merely an astronomical tool, but a sacred object. The design on the disk could have had religious or spiritual significance, with the symbols representing not only the movements of the stars, but also the divine order of the cosmos. In this interpretation, the disk may have been used in rituals or ceremonies, perhaps to align with certain celestial events such as solstices or eclipses. The people who created the Nebra sky disk might have believed that the movements of the stars were directly tied to the forces that governed life on Earth, and that understanding the stars was essential for maintaining harmony between the human and divine worlds. This possibility opens up another layer of mystery. The disk was found in a burial site, suggesting that it might have been used in death rituals or as a grave good for an important individual. Was the disk meant to guide the deceased through the afterlife, or did it serve as a marker for a celestial journey? Could it have been a tool for ritualistic purposes, meant to connect the living with the gods or to navigate the heavens in a spiritual sense? If the disk was part of a belief system, then what did it represent about the ancient worldview? Was the cosmos seen as a place of order or of mystery and chaos? The discovery of the Nebra sky disk also raises questions about the broader cultural context in which it was created. The people who made the disk were part of the so-called Unsettling culture, an early Bronze Age civilization that existed in Central Europe. They were skilled metalworkers, and their society had intricate burial practices, which suggest a complex and highly organized culture. but just how much of their culture and beliefs has been lost to time? The Nebra sky disk may be one of the few remaining artifacts that can provide insight into their worldview, their relationship with the stars, and their understanding of the forces that governed their lives. The mystery of the Nebra sky disk is compounded by the fact that it was not discovered in isolation. In fact, the disk was found with other artifacts, including bronze objects and a number of small gold pieces that are believed to have had symbolic significance. Yet, despite the presence of these additional items, the disk remains the most puzzling of the finds, suggesting that its meaning was far more important than just a decorative object. As the Nebra sky disk is examined more closely, scholars continue to speculate about its meaning and its role in the ancient world. Was it an early form of a star chart, or a ceremonial object with spiritual significance? Was it a tool for agricultural planning, or a symbolic representation of the divine? And most perplexing of all, why was it buried with a group of other valuable objects, as though it were a sacred relic, perhaps even an offering to the gods? While the Nebra sky disk may have been created by a people whose civilization has long since faded, its mysteries continue to intrigue us. The more we uncover about this ancient object, the more questions arise. Did the ancient people who created the Nebra sky disk truly understand the movements of the stars and the cosmos in ways we are only beginning to grasp? Or was this artifact merely a reflection of their deep reverence for the mysteries of the universe, a tool designed to connect the heavens to the earth and the living to the divine? The Nebra sky disk, with its intricate design and celestial symbolism, remains one of the most enigmatic objects from the Bronze Age. As we continue to explore its mysteries, we are reminded of the vast unknowns that still lie hidden beneath the surface of history. And as we gaze upon this ancient relic, we cannot help but wonder, what other secrets, waiting to be discovered, might still be hidden in the forgotten corners of the world? In the heart of the dense Mesoamerican jungles, where the ancient world still pulses beneath the layers of time, stands an extraordinary reminder of a civilization lost to the ages. Towering over the landscape are the colossal stone heads of the Olmec, a people whose influence reached far beyond their time, yet whose true nature remains as enigmatic as the very statues they left behind. The Olmec colossal heads are some of the most striking and puzzling monuments ever discovered in the Americas. Each head, crafted from massive basalt boulders, weighs several tons and stands several meters tall. These monumental figures, at least 17 of them, have been found scattered across the Olmec heartland, in what is now modern-day southern Mexico, are believed to represent the rulers of the Olmec civilization, which flourished between 1200 and 400 BC. They are truly awe-inspiring, their faces stern and unyielding, etched with extraordinary detail. Prominent cheekbones, thick lips, and elaborate headdresses. But beneath the surface, questions linger, leaving a deep sense of mystery surrounding both the creators and the purpose of these stone giants. The first of these colossal heads was uncovered in 1862 at the site of San Lorenzo, an ancient Olmec city, but it was not until the 20th century that their significance began to take root in the archaeological community. These heads were no ordinary sculptures. They were deliberately placed, positioned in ceremonial spaces or at the entrances of important buildings. They seemed to have a purpose beyond mere decoration, perhaps representing the divine authority of rulers, or perhaps symbolizing gods, spiritual figures, or warriors. What is most perplexing, however, is the sheer scale of the effort involved in creating these heads. The Olmecs did not have advanced tools or machinery, yet they were able to carve massive stones into lifelike forms with remarkable precision. The heads are believed to have been made using simple tools like hammers, stone chisels, and abrasive sands, yet the level of craftsmanship is astonishing. How did the Olmecs manage to transport these enormous stones, some weighing up to 40 tons, from the mountains where they were quarried to their sites of installation? The answers to this question remain elusive. One possible explanation is that the Olmecs used logs as rollers to move the stone heads, but there is still no definitive evidence of how the stones were transported across such distances. Did the Olmecs possess an advanced knowledge of engineering and mechanics that we have yet to fully appreciate? Or was there something else at work, something we are still unable to grasp? The identities of the individuals depicted in the colossal heads also remain a mystery. Some scholars believe that these figures represent the rulers of the Olmec city-states, with each head symbolizing a specific leader or lineage. The distinctive facial features, including the broad noses and wide mouths, are thought to suggest that these individuals were of high status. But the question remains, why were they carved in such a stylized and exaggerated manner? Were these heads intended to reflect actual physical appearances, or were they more symbolic, representing divine or supernatural qualities that the rulers possessed? There are also more speculative theories about the origins of the Olmec heads. Some researchers have suggested that these heads may not represent individual rulers at all, but rather abstract deities or mythological figures, perhaps gods of war or fertility, who were important in Olmec belief systems. Others have gone even further, speculating that the heads could be a form of communication, symbols meant to connect the living with the gods, or to mark specific cosmic events. The positioning of the heads in ceremonial spaces may support this idea, indicating that they were part of a larger spiritual or religious context. One of the most intriguing and controversial theories surrounding the colossal heads is the possibility that the Olmecs were not the sole creators of these monuments. Some fringe theories suggest that the Olmecs may have been influenced, or even directly helped, by an advanced, unknown civilization. The presence of such sophisticated craftsmanship and monumental sculptures has led some to question whether the Olmecs themselves were the original creators, or whether they inherited the knowledge to carve and transport these massive heads from an earlier, unknown culture. Could there have been other ancient civilizations, perhaps even outside of the Americas, whose influence reached across continents? Or is it simply that the Olmecs, with their advanced understanding of stonework and artistry, were capable of creating these incredible sculptures on their own? Such ideas remain speculative, but they invite a broader reflection on the history of human civilization. Could the Olmec colossal heads be a remnant of lost knowledge, passed down from one civilization to another? Or were they an entirely independent creation, demonstrating the unique ingenuity of a people whose achievements were far ahead of their time? The Olmec civilization itself is equally mysterious. Though the Olmecs are often considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica, their exact origins and the full extent of their influence remain unclear. They laid the foundation for many of the cultural and religious practices that would define the later civilizations of the region, such as the Maya and the Aztecs. Yet, much about their society, its social structure, its political organization, its religious beliefs, remains shrouded in uncertainty. Even their sudden decline, around 400 BC, raises more questions than answers. Why did the Olmec civilization, so advanced and influential in its time, seemingly disappear from the historical record? Were the colossal heads a symbol of a dying empire, or were they meant to preserve the memory of a civilization that believed its rulers would continue to watch over the land even after their fall? The lack of written records from the Olmec people makes it nearly impossible to understand the full meaning behind their monuments and their eventual disappearance. The colossal heads themselves may hold the key to understanding this mystery. Their placement at San Lorenzo, La Venta, and other Olmec centers suggests that they were central to the culture's political and spiritual life. Perhaps these heads were not only a physical manifestation of the ruler's power, but also a form of immortality, a way for the Olmec elite to perpetuate their influence and legacy long after their deaths. The heads may have been part of a ritual practice designed to honor the past while shaping the future. And yet, as with so many ancient mysteries, we are left with more questions than answers. What do these monumental figures truly represent? Were they portraits of actual rulers, gods, or something else entirely? How did the Olmecs, without the advanced technology that we assume to be necessary, achieve such feats of engineering and artistry? And what happened to the Olmec civilization, a culture that influenced so much of what followed, but has left behind so little for us to fully understand? As we ponder these questions, we are reminded that the colossal heads are not just relics of a distant past, they are symbols of our own desire to understand. They stand as silent witnesses to a civilization whose achievements are still being uncovered, their secrets still hidden beneath the earth. The more we uncover, the more we realize how little we truly know. What other mysteries might the Olmec heads hold, buried in the stone, waiting for us to discover? Only time, and perhaps more excavation, can reveal the answers. In the fertile plains of ancient China, nestled along the Luo River, once stood the magnificent capital of the Western Zhou dynasty, Fenghao. The Western Zhou period, lasting from around 1046 BC to 771 BC, marked a golden age in Chinese history. It was a time of cultural flourishing, military expansion, and the consolidation of power under the Zhou kings. Yet, despite the dynasty's profound influence, the sudden and mysterious collapse of the Western Zhou capital remains one of the greatest puzzles of ancient history. The site of Fenghao, now a sprawling archaeological landscape near modern-day Xi'an, is both awe-inspiring and haunting. The ruins are scattered over vast expanses of land, where massive earthworks, ancient foundations, and the remnants of palatial buildings lie in quiet ruin. At the heart of the site, what was once a thriving urban center, a hub of administration, religion, and power, now stands desolate, with no clear explanation as to why or how it fell. The collapse of Fenghao is a mystery wrapped in uncertainty. In the historical record, the Western Zhou dynasty is described as a powerful and highly organized state, its rulers enjoying both military dominance and spiritual authority. The Zhou kings ruled from their capital at Fenghao for centuries, overseeing a vast and prosperous realm. So, how did the capital, the seat of their power, fall so swiftly and so completely? The traditional explanation, provided by ancient Chinese texts such as the Zhuo Zhuan and the records of the Grand Historian, points to a dramatic event in 771 BC, the sacking of Fenghao by a coalition of nomadic tribes, including the Quanrong and other barbarian groups. According to these accounts, the Western Zhou capital was attacked and destroyed in a violent and sudden assault. The king was killed, and his court scattered, marking the end of the Western Zhou's dominance and the beginning of the Eastern Zhou period. This account suggests that the Western Zhou dynasty collapsed due to external military pressure. The nomadic groups from the north were growing in strength, and their incursions into Zhou territory were becoming more frequent and destructive. In the chaos of the attack on Fenghao, the once unassailable capital was overrun, and the Zhou rulers were forced to flee, eventually relocating to the new capital of Luoyang. However, the story of Fenghao's fall is not as simple as a single barbarian invasion. Archaeological evidence from the site suggests that the decline of the capital was more complex and perhaps began long before the sacking by the Quanrong. Excavations have uncovered signs of gradual decay, collapsed walls, fire damage, and evidence of abandonment that indicate the capital may have been in decline long before the nomadic tribes attacked. Could it be that internal factors, such as political instability, economic troubles, or even environmental changes, contributed to the collapse of the Zhou state? Some scholars have suggested that the Western Zhou period, despite its apparent prosperity, was rife with internal conflict. The Zhou kings, though powerful, relied heavily on a feudal system that granted significant autonomy to regional lords. Over time, these lords began to challenge the authority of the central Zhou government, leading to political fragmentation and infighting. By the time the nomadic tribes launched their attack on Fenghao, the Zhou state may have already been weakened from within, with various factions vying for control. Others have pointed to the possibility of environmental factors contributing to the fall of Fenghao. The region around the capital was susceptible to flooding, and there are indications that changes in the climate or shifts in the river's course may have disrupted agriculture and trade. If the environment began to fail the Zhou rulers, leading to food shortages or economic collapse, this could have made the capital more vulnerable to external threats, accelerating its decline. Yet, the most intriguing aspect of the collapse of Fenghao lies in the lingering question. Was the fall of the capital truly as sudden and catastrophic as ancient texts suggest? Or was it part of a larger, more gradual process of decline that unfolded over decades? The historical sources tell a dramatic tale of a violent attack, but the archaeological evidence seems to hint at something more complex, something that involves a combination of military, political, and environmental factors. Some scholars have even suggested that the fall of Fenghao may have been orchestrated from within the Zhou court itself. Could it be that the Zhou kings, realizing the internal divisions and external threats they faced, deliberately allowed the city to fall in order to usher in a new phase of their dynasty? Perhaps the fall of Fenghao was not just a tragedy, but a calculated move, a way to shift the power base of the Zhou state and ensure its survival in a changing world. The Zhou rulers might have recognized that the capital was no longer defensible and chose to abandon it rather than fight a losing battle. In this view, the relocation to Luoyang was not a defeat, but a strategic retreat, meant to preserve the core of the dynasty in the face of overwhelming pressure. This theory, however, remains speculative. There is no direct evidence to support the idea that the fall of Fenghao was a deliberate act, and it is just as likely that the Zhou court simply could not prevent the city's destruction. What remains clear, however, is that the collapse of the Western Zhou capital represents a significant turning point in Chinese history, marking the end of an era of centralized power and the beginning of the more fragmented and tumultuous Eastern Zhou period. As we piece together the fragments of this ancient mystery, the question still lingers. What truly led to the fall of Fenghao? Was it a violent, external invasion, a result of internal decay, or a combination of both? And why, after the fall of the capital, did the Zhou dynasty survive for centuries longer, despite the loss of its original heart? The answers to these questions may lie buried beneath the ruins of Fenghao itself, waiting for further excavation and exploration. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the mystery is that, even as we uncover more about the Western Zhou and their capital, the full scope of the collapse remains elusive. As we study the artifacts, the written records, and the ruins of Fenghao, we are left with a sense that much of the story remains hidden, waiting for the right clues to reveal themselves. Could there be more to the fall of Fenghao than we can currently comprehend? What might still be buried in the earth, waiting to tell us the secrets of a civilization that once ruled a vast and powerful empire? Only time and further research will tell, but the mystery of the collapse of Fenghao is far from over. In the highlands of what is now modern-day Turkey, Armenia, and Iran, the kingdom of Urartu once stood as a formidable power in the ancient Near East. Known for its impressive fortresses, vast reservoirs, and sophisticated artistry, Urartu was a major political and military force between the 9th and 6th centuries BC. Yet, despite its achievements, this kingdom vanished from history, its downfall shrouded in mystery. What brought an end to one of the ancient world's most enigmatic civilizations? The remnants of Urartu lie scattered across the landscape, their stone monuments and inscriptions still standing tall amidst the elements. The kingdom was centered in the region surrounding Lake Van, a vast, deep body of water nestled among the rugged peaks of the Armenian highlands. The ancient Urartian capital of Tushpa, located near the modern town of Van, is now an archaeological site, with the ruins of its once great walls and palaces still visible. The location of Urartu, with its strategic position between the great powers of Mesopotamia, Persia, and the Caucasus, speaks to its importance. But like so many ancient kingdoms, the questions surrounding its rise and fall remain a tantalizing enigma. The history of Urartu is largely reconstructed from the fragmented records that have survived. The Assyrians, who were frequent enemies of Urartu, left behind numerous inscriptions detailing their conflicts with the kingdom. These accounts paint a picture of a powerful and resilient state, engaged in constant warfare with its neighbors, particularly Assyria, which sought to extend its influence over the region. Despite the military pressure from Assyria, Urartu managed to hold its ground for centuries, with its kings asserting control over a vast territory that stretched across modern-day Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. The fall of Urartu, however, is not as well documented. The last great king of Urartu, Rusa II, ruled in the early 6th century BC. By the time of his reign, Urartu had already been weakened by constant warfare with the Assyrians and internal strife. The kingdom's final collapse is often attributed to the combined pressure of external invasions and internal political instability, but the exact nature of its decline remains unclear. What caused Urartu's sudden fall, and why did a kingdom that had once been so powerful and resourceful disintegrate so swiftly? The traditional explanation is that Urartu fell to the growing power of the Medes, who had been expanding their empire in the region. The Medes, an Iranian-speaking people, had been pushing southward, encroaching on the lands of Urartu. It is widely believed that the kingdom's final collapse came at the hands of these Iranian invaders, though the exact details remain elusive. Some suggest that the Medes may have simply absorbed Urartu into their own burgeoning empire, while others argue that the fall was precipitated by a series of raids, uprisings, and military defeats that weakened Urartu's central authority. Archaeological evidence does suggest that the kingdom suffered from repeated invasions and military losses in its final years. At the site of Tushpa, the ancient capital, archaeologists have uncovered signs of violent destruction: burnt buildings, collapsed walls, and shattered artifacts. These signs point to a sudden, violent end to the once thriving city. However, it remains unclear whether these events were caused by a single, decisive invasion, or whether the kingdom was gradually undermined by a combination of internal rebellion and external military pressure. Beyond military pressure, another theory suggests that Urartu's decline was also the result of environmental factors. The kingdom's economy was heavily reliant on agriculture, particularly the cultivation of wheat and barley in the fertile plains around Lake Van. Some scholars have pointed to evidence of climate change, such as prolonged droughts or shifting rainfall patterns, that may have disrupted Urartu's agricultural base and led to food shortages. The failure of crops could have weakened the kingdom's economy, destabilizing it and making it more vulnerable to invasion and internal unrest. If such environmental pressures were at play, they could have exacerbated the political and military struggles that Urartu was already facing. However, the most compelling question about the fall of Urartu is whether it was truly the Medes who delivered the final blow, or if there were other, less obvious factors at work. Could there have been internal political turmoil that led to the collapse? Urartu's kings were often embroiled in power struggles with rival factions within their court. In a kingdom that relied on a centralized monarchy, any weakness in leadership could have had disastrous consequences. It is possible that the kingdom was already unraveling from within, with factions fighting for control, while the external threats only hastened the inevitable collapse. Another intriguing aspect of Urartu's fall is the possibility that it was part of a broader pattern of regional upheaval. During the 7th and 6th centuries BC, the entire Near East was undergoing a period of profound transformation. The rise of new empires, the Medes, the Babylonians, and the Persians, was altering the balance of power in the region. Ancient kingdoms like Urartu, which had once held their own against the mighty Assyrians, were now caught between two powerful forces: the Assyrian Empire, which was in its final throes of power, and the Medes, who were emerging as a dominant force. In this context, the fall of Urartu could have been part of a larger wave of collapse that affected many of the smaller kingdoms in the region, as they were absorbed into larger empires or destroyed in the wake of shifting power dynamics. Even more speculative theories suggest that the fall of Urartu might have been influenced by factors beyond military and environmental pressures, perhaps something more enigmatic. Could the kingdom have been the victim of a series of catastrophes, such as a plague or an unforeseen disaster, that weakened its ability to resist invasion? Ancient records of the time often mention natural disasters or portents of doom, but whether these events played a role in Urartu's collapse is impossible to say with certainty. The silence of Urartu after its fall is also curious. Unlike other kingdoms that left behind written records detailing their conquest and eventual absorption into new empires, the end of Urartu seems to have been deliberately erased from history. The Medes, after their conquest of Urartu, did not leave much in the way of written accounts about their new holdings in the region. The absence of such records only deepens the mystery. Did the Medes simply annex Urartu and continue on, or was there a more violent, dramatic end to the kingdom? If the latter, why are there so few historical accounts to document it? As we study the remnants of Urartu, the fortified cities, the inscriptions, and the artifacts, it becomes apparent that there is much we still do not understand about this ancient kingdom. The collapse of Urartu is one of those moments in history where the answers seem to lie just beyond our grasp. Was it external forces, military invaders, and environmental changes that led to the fall of this once great kingdom? Or were there internal fractures that weakened Urartu long before the Medes arrived? And why does history remain so silent about the final days of this civilization? The questions surrounding Urartu's fall remain unanswered, and as new discoveries are made, we may one day find more pieces to this ancient puzzle. For now, the mystery lingers, urging us to look deeper into the ruins and wonder, what secrets, buried in the dust of time, are still waiting to be uncovered? In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers once nourished the cradle of civilization, there stood a king whose name is now inscribed in the annals of history as one of the most literate and learned of his time. Ashurbanipal, the last great king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, ruled during the 7th century BC. He is best known for his vast library at Nineveh, a collection that housed thousands of cuneiform tablets, offering a glimpse into the wisdom, culture, and knowledge of an entire civilization. But as impressive as this collection is, there is one haunting mystery that remains unresolved: the missing texts of Ashurbanipal. The library of Ashurbanipal was not merely a repository for royal decrees or military records. It was a grand archive of human knowledge. Scholars have uncovered texts covering a wide range of subjects, from astronomy and mathematics to medicine, history, and literature. One of the most famous discoveries from the library is the Epic of Gilgamesh, an ancient Sumerian tale of heroism and mortality that predates even Ashurbanipal's reign. But despite the treasure trove of texts that have survived the millennia, many believe that an even greater wealth of knowledge remains lost. What happened to the missing texts of Ashurbanipal? And why, in a library so meticulously curated, are some of the most important works of the ancient world seemingly absent from the record? When Ashurbanipal ascended to the throne in 668 BC, the Assyrian Empire was already a dominant force in the ancient Near East. His reign marked the height of Assyrian power, with vast territories stretching from Mesopotamia to Palestine, Egypt, and Anatolia. A king of immense ambition, Ashurbanipal sought not only military conquest, but also intellectual supremacy. He surrounded himself with scholars, scribes, and priests who collected the writings of earlier civilizations, preserving the knowledge of the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and others who had come before. The king's most remarkable achievement was the establishment of his royal library in Nineveh. Here, within the walls of his palace, thousands of clay tablets were stored, meticulously catalogued and carefully preserved. These texts spanned millennia of knowledge, much of it written in cuneiform, the ancient script of Mesopotamia. The library was not just a symbol of wealth and power. It was also a cultural and intellectual endeavor, a way to assert the superiority of the Assyrian Empire and to ensure that the knowledge of past civilizations would not be lost. Yet, despite the richness of the collection, there is evidence to suggest that much of Ashurbanipal's library may never have survived the centuries. Many of the texts that were once housed in Nineveh have simply disappeared. What remains of the library, discovered in the mid-19th century by British archaeologists, is only a fraction of what might have once existed. Thousands of tablets and scrolls are missing, works that could have provided further insight into the political, religious, and intellectual life of the ancient Near East. The most pressing question, however, is why these texts vanished. Some historians argue that the destruction of Nineveh, which occurred in 612 BC when the city fell to a combined force of Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians, led to the looting and burning of Ashurbanipal's library. When the Assyrian capital was sacked, it is possible that much of the library's vast collection was destroyed or carried away as spoils of war. The Assyrian Empire, already weakened by years of internal strife and external pressure, crumbled under the weight of the invasion. And with it, the legacy of Ashurbanipal's intellectual endeavor may have been lost. However, there is something particularly enigmatic about the disappearance of the texts. While many of the tablets that have survived were found in Nineveh, others were discovered scattered across the Assyrian Empire in cities like Nimrud and Ashur. This suggests that Ashurbanipal's library was not a singular fixed entity but may have had multiple locations or annexes where different collections were housed. Could some of these missing texts have been relocated to other parts of the empire before Nineveh's fall, only to disappear over time? Or is it possible that the missing texts were never in Nineveh to begin with? Adding to the mystery is the possibility that Ashurbanipal's library was far more comprehensive than we can imagine. The texts we have discovered offer a rich tapestry of ancient knowledge, but what of the works that have not been found? Were there texts dealing with philosophy, poetry, or astronomy that have simply been lost to time? Could there have been ancient works of science, technology, or medicine that were far ahead of their time, lost in the chaos of Assyria's collapse? Some researchers have speculated that the missing texts might have been deliberately hidden or concealed. Was there a reason why certain works were kept out of the public eye? In the aftermath of the Assyrian Empire's downfall, as new powers rose to prominence, it is conceivable that those who inherited the remnants of Ashurbanipal's knowledge might have intentionally obscured or suppressed certain writings. After all, knowledge is power, and some texts, particularly those that dealt with royal authority, military strategy, or religious doctrine, may have been seen as dangerous or subversive in the wrong hands. Yet, there is also the possibility that the loss of these texts was entirely accidental. The library of Ashurbanipal was, after all, a collection of physical objects, tablets made of clay that were susceptible to the ravages of time and the elements. Even in ancient times, the preservation of written works was a precarious endeavor. Could some texts have simply crumbled away, their contents lost forever to decay? Or might they have been destroyed in natural disasters, such as earthquakes or floods, which were common in the region. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that the missing texts are still out there, waiting to be rediscovered. In recent years, archaeological excavations in the Middle East have unearthed a wealth of ancient manuscripts and artifacts. Could the missing works of Ashurbanipal lie buried in the sands, yet to be found? Might future discoveries reveal more fragments of his vast library, offering new insights into the intellectual world of ancient Assyria? The mystery of the missing texts of Ashurbanipal invites us to wonder how much of history has been lost to time. What secrets, buried in the dust of ancient cities, have never been revealed? And what knowledge, once contained in the libraries of kings, has vanished without a trace? As we continue to explore the ruins of Nineveh and other ancient sites, we are reminded that the past is not a fixed entity, but a story constantly unfolding, one that still holds many secrets, waiting to be uncovered. As we look back on the history of Ashurbanipal's library, we are left with the lingering question: how much more of the ancient world remains hidden, buried beneath the ruins of empires that have long since fallen? And will we ever recover the lost treasures of knowledge that have shaped the course of human civilization? Only time and the ongoing efforts of historians and archaeologists will tell. In the remote deserts of southern Peru, nestled in the Nazca Plateau, there exists a phenomenon that has baffled archaeologists, historians, and explorers for centuries. The Nazca lines, giant, enigmatic geoglyphs etched into the earth, some stretching over 1,000 feet across, are so vast that they can only be fully appreciated from the sky. The intricacy of these ancient designs, visible only from a high vantage point, has led to a multitude of theories regarding their purpose, origin, and meaning. Yet, despite decades of research and exploration, the true purpose of the Nazca lines remains one of history's greatest mysteries. The lines, which were created by the Nazca civilization between approximately 500 BC and 500 AD, are an astounding feat of ancient engineering. They consist of hundreds of geometric shapes, straight lines, and intricate representations of animals and plants. Some of these figures are so large that they can only be comprehended from the air, suggesting that their creators had an understanding of perspective that was far beyond what was believed possible for their time. But why were these massive figures created in the first place? And what meaning did they hold for the people who carved them into the dry desert floor? The mainstream explanation points to religious and ceremonial purposes. The Nazca people, who thrived in this arid region, are believed to have created the lines as part of their spiritual practices. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the geoglyphs were associated with water and fertility rituals, vital for a civilization living in such a harsh and unforgiving environment. The Nazca Plateau, while rich in cultural significance, was also plagued by droughts, and water was a scarce and precious resource. Could the lines have been created as a form of communication with the gods, to implore them for rain and prosperity? In this theory, the geoglyphs represent offerings or prayers to deities, with the animals, such as the spider, the monkey, and the hummingbird, symbolizing various forces of nature. Some have suggested that these figures were designed to be viewed by the gods from the sky, as the ancient Nazca people might have believed that their gods resided in the heavens. The concept of sympathetic magic might have been at play, whereby the creation of these images on the earth was meant to bring about a corresponding effect in the sky, like rain or favorable weather. For a people so reliant on agriculture, the importance of such rituals cannot be overstated. But even as this theory persists, many questions remain unanswered. Why were these designs created on such an immense scale? And why were they exclusively made in the desert, far from any significant settlements or centers of power? The Nazca lines are scattered over a vast area, and many of the figures are so intricate that they are not easily accessible or visible to the people who might have used them. What purpose did they serve for the people who lived in close proximity to them? Were these creations purely ceremonial, or did they serve a more practical, even political function? Some archaeologists have proposed that the Nazca lines were part of a larger network of sacred pathways or roads, perhaps linked to the region's religious and social structures. This theory suggests that the lines could have been used in pilgrimage routes, leading worshippers to sacred sites or facilitating rituals that were central to the Nazca worldview. The geometric patterns may not have been intended to be seen as standalone designs, but rather as elements within a larger spiritual landscape, a complex system of visual markers guiding the faithful toward higher planes of existence or sacred events. Yet there are those who argue that the lines had an even more practical application, perhaps as part of an ancient calendar system. Some of the shapes, such as the massive trapezoids, have been linked to the solar and lunar cycles, suggesting that the Nazca may have used the lines to mark important celestial events. The alignment of the lines with the stars, the solstices, and other astronomical phenomena has prompted some to consider the possibility that the Nazca were using the geoglyphs as a form of astronomical observatory, marking time in a way that could have been integral to the planning of agricultural activities. If this theory is correct, the lines would not only have served religious purposes but practical ones as well, acting as a tool for the Nazca people to navigate the complex rhythms of the cosmos and their environment. However, not everyone agrees with this interpretation. Some fringe theories delve into even more speculative ideas, suggesting that the Nazca lines may have been created by a civilization with a deeper, perhaps even otherworldly understanding of the Earth. The sheer scale and precision of the lines have led some to propose that they could only have been constructed with the assistance of advanced technology, possibly even extraterrestrial influence. While this theory is far from mainstream, it persists in popular culture, fueled by the enigmatic nature of the geoglyphs and the impossibility of fully understanding their construction methods. Could these lines have been a message from beings not of this world, intended to communicate with the people of Earth? As the theories range from the practical to the fantastical, one thing is certain: the mystery of the Nazca lines endures. Despite modern technological advancements, such as satellite imagery and advanced archaeological tools, there is still no consensus on why the Nazca people created these massive drawings, or how they were able to achieve such precision without the benefit of modern technology. Even more compelling is the question of how the lines remained intact for centuries, their intricate details preserved on the desert floor, waiting to be discovered by future generations. The enigma deepens when we consider the possibility that the full meaning of the Nazca lines has been lost to history. The civilization that created them, the Nazca people, vanished long before the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, leaving behind only these giant marks in the earth as their legacy. The Spanish chroniclers, who were the first Europeans to encounter the region, made no mention of the lines, perhaps because they were seen as a mysterious and incomprehensible part of the landscape. In the absence of written records from the Nazca themselves, we are left to piece together their meaning from what little evidence remains. As we stand before the towering figures of the hummingbird, the monkey, and the spider, we are reminded of the depth of human creativity and ingenuity. The Nazca lines, whether they were drawn for religious, astronomical, or symbolic reasons, are a testament to the power of belief and the human desire to leave a mark on the world. Yet, the question remains: what was the true purpose of these lines? Were they a cosmic map, a ritual offering, or something else entirely? And what, if anything, have we yet to uncover about the civilization that gave rise to them? The mystery of the Nazca lines is far from solved. As we look out over the vast, arid expanse of the desert, we are left with the thought that perhaps the answers lie just beyond our grasp, hidden in the ancient patterns etched in the sand. Could there be more to the Nazca lines than we can currently comprehend? What secrets, still buried beneath the earth, await discovery in the dust of time? The questions remain, and the mystery endures. Amid the treasures of the Roman Empire, nestled in a quiet corner of the British Museum, there lies an artifact that has puzzled scientists, historians, and archaeologists for centuries. The Lycurgus cup, a masterpiece of ancient Roman craftsmanship, is not merely a work of art, but a profound mystery in the history of science. Its beauty is undeniable, its design intricate, but there is something about it that sets it apart from all other ancient artifacts: its ability to change color. At first glance, the cup appears to be made of jade or some kind of precious stone, its surface gleaming with a deep green hue. But when the light shifts, something extraordinary happens. The cup transforms, shifting from green to a striking red, as if it holds a secret within its glass. This optical effect, though mesmerizing, is not merely an artistic flourish. It is a mystery that has confounded modern scientists, who have only recently begun to understand the phenomenon behind the cup's color-changing properties. The Lycurgus cup, thought to have been crafted in the 4th century AD, depicts a scene from Greek mythology, the tragic story of Lycurgus, the king of the Edonians, who was punished by the gods for his violent persecution of the followers of Dionysus. The cup's intricate design, with its finely etched details and delicate figures, speaks to the high level of skill possessed by Roman craftsmen. But it is the material of the cup, its composition, that raises the most profound questions. When the Lycurgus cup was first discovered in the 1950s, researchers were intrigued by its unusual properties, but the true explanation for its color-changing effect remained elusive. It was only in the 20th century, with the advent of modern scientific techniques, that the mystery began to unravel. What scientists eventually discovered was nothing short of astonishing. The cup's unique ability to change color was the result of a form of nanotechnology, an ancient technology that had been lost for centuries. The key to the cup's color-changing properties lies in the way the glass was made. Modern glass is composed of large particles that scatter light in a predictable manner, but the glass of the Lycurgus cup contains particles that are so small, just a few nanometers in diameter, that they interact with light in an entirely different way. These nanoparticles, made of gold and silver, are embedded within the glass itself, creating a phenomenon known as nano-optics. As light passes through the cup, it is refracted by these tiny particles, causing the colors to shift depending on the angle of the light. But how did the Romans, with their relatively primitive tools and technology, possess the knowledge to create such a sophisticated object? The concept of nanotechnology, the manipulation of materials on an atomic or molecular scale, was not understood by scientists until the 20th century, and yet, in the 4th century, the Romans were capable of creating a material that exhibited nanotechnology-like properties. Could the ancient Romans have stumbled upon these techniques through trial and error, or was there a deeper, more mysterious understanding of the natural world that allowed them to harness the properties of matter at such a fine scale? Some researchers speculate that the use of gold and silver nanoparticles in the Lycurgus cup was a well-kept secret of Roman craftsmen, passed down through generations of artisans who had perfected the process. This theory suggests that the ability to create color-changing glass may have been highly prized by the ruling elite, a technique reserved for the most prestigious objects and symbols of power. If this is the case, then the Lycurgus cup may have been not only a work of art, but also a status symbol, a way for the Romans to demonstrate their superiority over other civilizations by showcasing their advanced understanding of materials and optics. Yet, even as scientists have unraveled the mystery of how the Lycurgus cup works, they are still left with the question of why it was created in the first place. What purpose did the ancient craftsmen have in mind when they crafted such a remarkable object? Was it simply an aesthetic innovation, a way to impress and delight the viewer? Or was there a deeper, more symbolic meaning behind the cup's color-changing properties? One possible explanation is that the color change was symbolic of the divine nature of the object. In the story of Lycurgus, the king is punished by the gods for his actions, and the cup may have been designed to reflect the divine influence over the mortal world. The shifting colors could be seen as a visual representation of the god's capriciousness, a reminder that the divine can alter the course of events at will. In this interpretation, the cup becomes more than just a drinking vessel. It becomes a vessel of power, a symbol of the forces that govern both the natural and supernatural worlds. Another theory suggests that the color-changing cup may have been intended to serve a ritualistic or ceremonial purpose. The ancient Romans were known for their elaborate rituals and religious ceremonies, and the use of a cup with such remarkable properties could have been an important part of religious observance. Perhaps the changing colors were meant to evoke a sense of awe and wonder in those who witnessed the transformation, reinforcing the belief in the divine power that the Romans attributed to the gods. But the most compelling aspect of the Lycurgus cup is the question it raises about ancient knowledge and technology. How was it that the Romans, with their advanced understanding of materials and optics, could create something that wouldn't be fully understood until modern times? Did they possess knowledge of nanotechnology, or was this simply an accidental discovery? Some have even suggested that the advanced techniques used to create the Lycurgus cup were lost over time, only to be rediscovered centuries later with the advent of modern science. There are those who argue that the ancient Romans were not the only civilization capable of such feats. The use of nanotechnology and other advanced materials may have been widespread in the ancient world, but much of this knowledge has been lost to time. Could other ancient civilizations, such as the Egyptians or the Greeks, have also understood the properties of materials at the microscopic level? The fact that the Lycurgus cup remains the only known surviving example of ancient nanotechnology only deepens the mystery. As we examine the Lycurgus cup, its radiant colors shifting before our eyes, we are reminded of the incredible potential of ancient civilizations to create works of art and technology that still challenge our understanding. The cup's color-changing properties may be one of the most mysterious and remarkable achievements of the Roman world, but it also raises profound questions about what other knowledge and technology might have been lost to history. The true story of the Lycurgus cup, how it was made, why it was made, and what it represents, remains elusive. Was it simply an artistic innovation, or was it a symbol of something far more profound? And what does it tell us about the lost knowledge of the ancient world? As we continue to uncover the secrets of the past, one can't help but wonder, what other ancient technologies hidden in plain sight are waiting to be rediscovered? In the shadow of the Mediterranean Sea, near the shores of modern-day Tunisia, lies the ancient city of Carthage. Once a thriving powerhouse of trade, culture, and military might, Carthage stood as the rival of Rome for centuries. But despite its prominence in the ancient world, one aspect of Carthaginian society has cast a long and troubling shadow over its legacy, a practice that has ignited debates, speculation, and moral outrage for over 2 millennia, the ritual sacrifice of children. The subject of child sacrifice in Carthage is one of the most controversial and hotly debated topics in ancient history. Archaeological evidence, combined with ancient texts and historical accounts, has led many to believe that Carthaginian society practiced the ritualistic sacrifice of children, offering them to the gods in a desperate bid for favor or divine protection. But the question remains, was this practice truly as widespread and central to Carthaginian religion as some suggest, or is it a story shaped by bias and misinterpretation? The most famous evidence for child sacrifice comes from the discovery of the Tophet, an ancient burial site located just outside the walls of Carthage. Here, archaeologists have uncovered thousands of urns containing the cremated remains of infants and young children. The site is named after the biblical Tophet, a term used to describe a place of sacrifice in the Hebrew Bible. But while these remains have been a focal point for the argument that Carthage was a society that ritually sacrificed its children, the interpretation of these findings is far from straightforward. The urns at the Tophet are often inscribed with inscriptions to the gods, particularly Baal Hammon, the chief deity of Carthage, and Tanit, his consort. Many of the urns contain the remains of children, some of them no older than a few months. The evidence appears damning. The very presence of these infant remains in a site dedicated to religious offerings suggests, to many, that the Carthaginians were offering their children as sacrifices to appease their gods, seeking divine favor or protection for their city and people. Ancient texts written by historians such as Plutarch and Diodorus Siculus also support the notion of child sacrifice, with accounts describing the Carthaginians as engaging in horrific ceremonies in which children were burned alive or ritually slaughtered in the name of religious devotion. According to these accounts, the practice was meant to secure the gods' protection during times of war or disaster, with the sacrifice of a child believed to be a powerful means of ensuring divine intervention. But the idea of child sacrifice in Carthage is not universally accepted. Over the years, a number of scholars have questioned the interpretation of the evidence. They argue that the remains found in the Tophet may not represent ritual sacrifice at all. Instead, they suggest that these children may have died from natural causes, and their remains were then buried in the Tophet as part of a funerary practice meant to honor the dead. In this view, the presence of the urns with inscriptions to Baal Hammon and Tanit could be interpreted not as evidence of ritual sacrifice, but as a form of religious burial, where the gods were invoked as protectors of the soul in the afterlife. One theory proposes that the children buried in the Tophet were not sacrificed in a violent or bloody ceremony, but rather were part of a form of divine offering that was not intended to be understood as sacrifice in the modern sense. Some have suggested that the children may have been seen as symbolic offerings. Perhaps their deaths were not the result of ritual slaughter, but rather a form of sacrificial death, where the child's death was seen as a form of tribute to the gods, an offering of purity or innocence to secure the favor of the divine. In addition, there are those who argue that the Roman accounts of Carthaginian child sacrifice are exaggerated or even politically motivated. The Romans, after all, were the Carthaginians' bitter enemies, and the depiction of Carthage as a city that engaged in horrific and barbaric rituals would have served to justify Rome's eventual destruction of the city in 146 BC. By portraying the Carthaginians as ruthless child sacrificers, the Romans could portray their own conquest of Carthage as a righteous act of divine intervention. This theory of Roman exaggeration, however, does not completely negate the possibility that child sacrifice did take place in Carthage. Rather, it raises the question of how much of the historical narrative surrounding Carthaginian sacrifice has been shaped by the biases of ancient writers. It also prompts us to reconsider what sacrifice meant to the Carthaginians. Was it a literal slaughter? Or could it have been a symbolic gesture of offering that modern sensibilities struggle to understand? Further complicating the debate is the possibility that child sacrifice, if it did occur, was not a practice that every Carthaginian would have been familiar with or participated in. Some scholars suggest that the practice, if it occurred, was likely reserved for the elite, the ruling class, or certain religious sects within Carthaginian society, making it an isolated and not universally accepted practice. The idea that child sacrifice could have been a state-sanctioned ritual for times of crisis or war has led some to speculate that it was more a political tool than a widespread religious custom. Yet, the physical evidence, the thousands of urns and the remains of children, cannot be entirely ignored. While there is still debate about how these children died and why they were buried in the Tophet, the sheer scale of the burial site suggests that something significant was occurring in Carthage. Could this practice have been part of a larger cultural framework in which the life of a child, perhaps viewed as the purest form of sacrifice, held immense symbolic value? Or is it possible that the children buried at the Tophet were victims of a tragic practice that was later exaggerated in Roman propaganda? As we gaze upon the remnants of the Tophet, the thousands of urns lying in the earth, it becomes clear that the true purpose of these children's deaths remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Were they sacrifices to the gods in the desperate hope for divine intervention? Or were they part of a more complex religious and cultural practice that we, as modern humans, struggle to comprehend? What did the Carthaginians believe, and what role did these rituals play in the life of their society? The question of child sacrifice in Carthage lingers, unresolved and haunting. As we dig deeper into the past, one thing is certain: the truth may be more complicated than we can imagine, hidden in the layers of history, buried beneath the ancient sands of Carthage. What remains of the ritual and religious life of this mysterious civilization? What else might still be waiting to be uncovered in the shadows of the Tophet? And perhaps most profoundly, what does it say about our own understanding of history, morality, and the rituals of ancient cultures? In the heart of northern Europe, amid the vast and treacherous bogs, a haunting mystery lies buried beneath the dark, murky waters. These peat bogs, with their still, damp air, hold more than just ancient plant matter. They conceal the remains of human beings, perfectly preserved for millennia. Known as the Celtic bog bodies, these ancient corpses have captivated archaeologists and historians for centuries, sparking debates about their origins, their purpose, and the rituals that might have led to their untimely deaths. The bogs of Ireland, Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands have yielded numerous bodies from the Iron Age, many of which date back to the first millennium BC. Some of these bodies are remarkably well preserved, with skin, hair, and even fingernails still intact, as if they have only recently passed from life into death. But the preservation of these bodies is not a mere accident of nature. These individuals were placed in the bogs intentionally, often in a manner that suggests a ritualistic or ceremonial significance. Unlike most ancient burials, where bodies are interred in graves or cremated, the bog bodies seem to have been cast into the water, sometimes bound, sometimes brutally disfigured. The manner in which they were sacrificed, or perhaps killed, raises profound questions. Were these people the victims of ritual killings? And if so, why were they chosen to meet such a fate? The most common explanation offered by historians is that the bog bodies were part of a religious or sacrificial practice. The Celts, who inhabited much of northern Europe during the Iron Age, are known to have had a rich and complex religious system, one that included nature worship, deities tied to the land, and a belief in the spiritual power of water. Bogs, in particular, were seen as sacred places, where the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual realm was thought to be thin. It is within these sacred waters that many of the bog bodies have been found, suggesting that they were placed there deliberately as offerings to the gods. The most famous example of this type of burial is the discovery of the Lindo Man in England, a well-preserved body found in 1984. Lindo Man's body was ritually bound, his throat cut, and his skull fractured, indicating that he was killed in a brutal and deliberate manner. The fact that he was placed in the bog, a place of ritual importance, suggests that his death was not accidental. Theories abound about why he and others like him were sacrificed. Some suggest that he was a victim of a fertility ritual intended to ensure the prosperity of the land, while others believe he was offered up in times of crisis, perhaps to appease the gods during a period of drought, famine, or war. But the mystery does not end there. The details of the ritual killings raise even more questions. Why were the bodies so carefully placed in the bogs? Why were they often bound or mutilated? In some cases, the bodies appear to have been tortured before death. The ritualistic nature of these deaths suggests that the people who lived in these ancient societies believed that sacrifices, often human, were necessary to maintain balance in the world, to secure divine favor, or to ensure the survival of the tribe. But who were these individuals chosen for such an ominous fate? Were they volunteers, willing to offer themselves in service to the gods? Or were they captives, criminals, or slaves, sacrificed to appease the divine forces that governed the Celts' understanding of life and death? The most chilling aspect of these ritual killings is the sheer brutality that is often associated with them. While some bodies show signs of peaceful death, others display evidence of violent struggle. The skull of a bog body found in Germany shows deep, crushing wounds, suggesting a brutal execution. A woman's body discovered in Denmark was found with her hands bound and her throat slit. These deliberate signs of violence raise the unsettling possibility that the Celts, like other ancient peoples, believed that the more violent and gruesome the sacrifice, the greater the appeasement to the gods. Yet, despite the apparent evidence of ritual killings, some scholars have proposed that these bodies were not sacrificed at all, but rather died in ways that we still do not fully understand. Some suggest that the bodies were merely abandoned in the bogs due to illness, famine, or other societal stresses. In this view, the bog bodies could represent individuals who were marginalized by their communities, their deaths seen as an unfortunate consequence of disease or social upheaval. The bogs, in this interpretation, may have been used simply as a convenient burial place, rather than a sacred site for ritualistic sacrifice. Moreover, there are those who argue that the ritual sacrifice theory may be an oversimplification of a much more complex cultural practice. Perhaps the Celts did not perform human sacrifices in the way we imagine them, public, bloody ceremonies, but rather incorporated these deaths into a broader system of religious and social customs that we can no longer fully comprehend. In this sense, the ritual killings, while horrifying to us, might have had a very different meaning to the Celts, one that we cannot entirely grasp from our modern perspective. Intriguingly, the discovery of the bog bodies has also sparked some fringe theories, including the suggestion that the Celts had a profound understanding of death and the afterlife. Could these bodies represent not just sacrifices, but a form of transition from the mortal world to the spiritual realm? Were these individuals chosen because they were believed to possess a special connection to the divine, perhaps even acting as intermediaries between the gods and the living? The idea that the bogs served as a portal to the other world has intrigued some archaeologists and historians, who suggest that the ritual killings were meant to ensure that the deceased could pass into a spiritual existence that transcended their earthly life. As we gaze out over the silent, eerie bogs that have preserved these bodies for over 2,000 years, we are left to wonder what lies beneath the surface of these ancient rituals. Was the practice of child sacrifice, of violent death, a necessary part of the Celts' spiritual world? Or were these rituals an expression of something deeper, a fear, a hope, a belief in forces greater than themselves? And why were the bodies so carefully preserved in the bogs, treated with such reverence, even in death? The mystery of the Celtic bog bodies is far from solved. The more we uncover about these ancient practices, the more questions arise. Were the sacrifices purely for religious purposes? Or did they reflect deeper social, political, or personal motives? And what do these preserved bodies tell us about the people who lived in these ancient lands, about their beliefs, their fears, and their understanding of life and death? As we continue to unravel the enigma of the bog bodies, we are reminded that the mysteries of the past are often shrouded in layers of time, waiting to be uncovered. But no matter how many answers we find, the questions persist. What drove the Celts to perform such violent rituals? And what else, hidden in the bogs, might still remain to be discovered? In the annals of military history, few names evoke as much awe and intrigue as the Persian Immortals, an elite force of warriors who served the Achaemenid kings with unmatched loyalty and prowess. Known for their legendary discipline and their role as the backbone of the Persian Empire's military might, the Immortals were a symbol of power, strength, and immortality. Yet, despite their storied legacy, much about the Immortals remains shrouded in mystery. The name Immortals conjures an image of an almost mythical force, men whose strength and vitality defied the natural limits of life. But was this immortality literal, or was it a symbol of something deeper? The truth, as with so many aspects of ancient history, is far more complex and elusive. The Immortals were first recorded in history during the reign of King Darius I in the 5th century BC, though it is likely that they existed long before then. Their name, Immortals, has led to much speculation, as it seems to imply a group of soldiers who never died. The reality, however, is far more grounded. It is believed that the name referred to the fact that the Immortals were constantly replenished by new recruits, ensuring that the force was always at full strength, regardless of casualties. When one of the soldiers fell in battle or became incapacitated, another would immediately take their place, preserving the unit's size and strength, and creating the impression of a force that could never be diminished. This idea of a perpetually strong and unyielding force was perhaps the most powerful symbol of the Persian Immortals. For the Achaemenid rulers, the Immortals were more than just soldiers. They were a symbol of divine favor and unbroken strength. They were seen as the embodiment of the king's power on earth, his personal guard, and the elite warriors who would protect the empire at all costs. Yet the question remains: who were these men? And what was their true identity? Historians have long debated the composition and role of the Immortals, but many details about their origins and training remain elusive. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Immortals is their uniform, an ensemble of elaborate attire, complete with distinctive dress, armor, and weaponry. In reliefs and carvings found at Persepolis and other sites, the Immortals are depicted wearing long robes, conical helmets, and carrying bows and spears. They are often shown in perfect formation, standing in stark contrast to the other soldiers, who are depicted in more varied, less ceremonial garb. This distinct uniform has sparked debate about the cultural significance of the Immortals. Were they simply a military unit, or did they also serve as a symbol of the divine power of the Persian kings? There is also the matter of their recruitment. While some sources suggest that the Immortals were drawn from across the vast territories of the Persian Empire, others propose that they were primarily recruited from specific ethnic groups. Some historians believe that the elite force was made up of Medes, a group that played a pivotal role in the establishment of the Achaemenid Empire. Others speculate that the Immortals may have included warriors from various regions, including those from areas that were later part of the empire, such as Anatolia and Central Asia. What is clear is that the Immortals were an elite fighting force that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. Ancient Greek writers, including Herodotus, describe them as being disciplined and unyielding in battle. The sight of the Immortals marching into battle was said to be both awe-inspiring and terrifying, as they were often depicted in formations that conveyed a sense of unity and invincibility. However, the role of the Immortals was not solely limited to military conflict. They were also used as a symbol of the king's power, employed to convey his divine authority and the might of his empire. This use of military forces as symbols of royal power was not unique to Persia, but the Immortals embodied this idea more than any other force in the ancient world. Their presence at court, their roles in ceremonial events, and their participation in religious observances all reinforced their position as the personal protectors of the king and the very embodiment of imperial power. The presence of the Immortals, however, was not limited to the battlefield or the palace. Their image and symbolism extended into the cultural fabric of the Achaemenid Empire. They were depicted in art, literature, and religious iconography as immortal beings, a concept that resonated deeply with the Persian ideals of kingship and divine favor. But as with all great symbols, the truth behind the Immortals remained elusive. Were they truly immortal in any sense of the word, or was their name simply a reflection of the political and religious narrative woven around them? Some scholars have proposed that the Immortals' immortality was a product of Persian propaganda, designed to create an aura of invincibility around the empire. In this interpretation, the Immortals were not a group of warriors with supernatural powers, but rather an elite group whose reputation was carefully cultivated to maintain the Persian king's image as the supreme ruler on earth. Their unchanging number was meant to signify the enduring strength of the empire and the divine favor that protected it. Others suggest that the name may have had a more literal meaning in the minds of the people who first used it. Could the Immortals have been viewed as semi-divine figures, with a connection to the gods themselves? In ancient Persia, kings were often seen as divine figures, and the Immortals, serving as the king's personal guard, may have been imbued with a sense of divine protection, making them seem immortal in the eyes of their people. Yet another theory proposes that the Immortals' name and their role in the empire were the result of a complex system of military organization that allowed the Persian kings to maintain an elite fighting force in the face of constant war and expansion. In this view, the Immortals were less about mysticism and more about practical military strategy, ensuring that the king's most trusted warriors were always ready to fight, no matter the cost. As we study the remains of Persepolis and the relics of the Persian Empire, the mystery of the Immortals continues to intrigue. What were they really? Immortal warriors, as their name suggests, or elite soldiers bound by the unyielding forces of politics and power? And to what extent did the symbolism of the Immortals contribute to the myth of the Persian Empire's invincibility? The true identity of the Immortals may forever remain obscured by the sands of time. But as we look back on their legacy, at the stone carvings, the ancient writings, and the enduring fascination they inspire, we are reminded that the line between history, myth, and propaganda is often blurred. The question of who the Immortals were is not just about the men who served in their ranks, but about how their story was crafted by those who sought to define the very nature of empire, immortality, and divine power. What else might still be hidden in the ruins of Persepolis? What truths, buried beneath the weight of time and legend, remain to be uncovered? And how much of the story of the Immortals is still yet to be written? In the shadow of the Great Pyramids of Giza, at the edge of the ancient city of Memphis, lies the vast necropolis of Saqqara, a site of enduring mystery where the sands of time have preserved the stories of Egypt's ancient elite. But it is not only the pharaohs and their grand tombs that have drawn the curiosity of modern archaeologists. Beneath the surface of Saqqara, a more enigmatic discovery has surfaced, one that has left even the most seasoned experts pondering the unknown. In 2019, the excavation of an ancient tomb at Saqqara revealed a discovery that, while fascinating, raised more questions than answers. A tomb that appeared to be dedicated not to a king or nobleman, but to something far more mysterious: an animal. Not just any animal, but a creature whose identity was not immediately clear, and whose significance to the ancient Egyptians remains elusive. The tomb, believed to date back to the late period of Egypt's history, around 664 to 332 BC, was part of a larger network of burial sites that had been used for thousands of years by the priests, officials, and dignitaries of Memphis. The tomb in question was unlike others found in the area. It was dedicated to a creature that, to this day, remains unidentified. The animal remains, interred in a tomb alongside offerings, created an immediate sense of intrigue and speculation. The discovery began as a routine excavation of a well-known burial site, but as archaeologists dug deeper, they uncovered a surprising find: a number of carefully laid remains, some skeletal, others mummified, of what appeared to be a large, unknown animal. The body of the creature was wrapped in fine linen, a sign that it had been treated with reverence, as if it were deserving of the same respect as a human being. Alongside the body, a series of unusual artifacts were found: statues, amulets, and offerings, all pointing to the belief that this was not just any animal, but one with a role of great significance. At first, the archaeologists believed they had discovered the tomb of an exotic animal, perhaps one that had been prized for its rarity. Could this have been a lion, a panther, or some other large, majestic creature? In ancient Egypt, animals were often seen as symbols of power, strength, and the divine. Lions, for example, were associated with the goddess Sekhmet, while the cat, revered for its grace and cunning, was tied to the goddess Bastet. But the remains found at Saqqara did not match the typical animals known to have been revered by the ancient Egyptians. The creature was not easily identifiable, leaving experts perplexed. Some speculate that the animal could have been a species that is now extinct, or one whose remains had simply not been studied in detail before. Others suggest that it might have been a type of hybrid creature, possibly a symbol of the gods, meant to convey both the animal's physical attributes and its spiritual significance. The idea that this animal was not just a creature of flesh and blood, but a symbolic representation of something divine, is not far-fetched. The ancient Egyptians, known for their rich mythology and belief in the supernatural, often assigned symbolic meaning to animals, both real and imagined. Adding to the mystery is the fact that no other tombs from this period have been found to contain similar animal remains. This has led some to wonder whether this particular creature held a unique status in the Egyptian pantheon. Was it an animal that had been specially bred for religious or ceremonial purposes? Or could it have been a rare and sacred creature that was sacrificed for the gods? While the discovery of this animal tomb has drawn attention, it is by no means the first time that animals have been found buried in Egypt. The ancient Egyptians frequently mummified animals, either as offerings to the gods or as pets to accompany their owners in the afterlife. Cats, ibises, and crocodiles, for example, were all commonly mummified. But the context of this particular tomb, with its detailed and deliberate treatment of the animal's remains, sets it apart from other such discoveries. This animal was treated as something far more important than a simple pet or offering. It was, in a sense, elevated to the status of the divine. Perhaps most intriguing of all is the question of the identity of the animal itself. The remains have not yet been conclusively identified, and scientists continue to study the bones and mummified tissues in hopes of making a positive identification. Some have suggested that it could be a large feline, possibly a type of wildcat that once roamed the deserts of Egypt, while others believe it may have been a type of hyena or jackal. However, none of these theories fully explain the creature's unique characteristics, and so the true nature of the animal remains an open question. The animal's tomb has also raised broader questions about the nature of ancient Egyptian religion and ritual. Was this creature viewed as a direct link between the mortal world and the divine? The Egyptians were known for their elaborate burial practices, which often included sacrifices to ensure a safe passage to the afterlife. Could this animal have been seen as an intermediary between the human world and the gods? Was it a messenger or a divine guide, leading the deceased into the next life? The mystery of the Saqqara animal tomb is also further complicated by the fact that this discovery occurred in an era of Egypt's history when the religious practices of the ancient world were undergoing significant change. The late period saw the resurgence of various gods and deities, some of which had been forgotten or marginalized in earlier centuries. Could this tomb, dedicated to a mysterious animal, be a clue to the evolution of Egyptian religious thought during this time of transition? What is certain is that the discovery of this animal tomb adds another layer of complexity to the ongoing puzzle of ancient Egypt. The tomb's location, its unusual contents, and the mystery surrounding the creature's identity all point to something more than mere curiosity. The fact that the Egyptians went to such lengths to honor this animal suggests that it held a place of importance in their beliefs, one that we have yet to fully understand. As we continue to dig into the past, uncovering secrets long hidden beneath the sands of Saqqara, the mystery of the Saqqara unknown animal tomb remains unsolved. What kind of animal was it, and why was it given such reverence? What role did it play in the lives of the ancient Egyptians, and what deeper meanings might it hold in the context of their complex spiritual world? As the excavation continues, we are left with the unsettling possibility that much more is yet to be discovered, hidden in the dark, sacred tombs beneath the sands of Egypt, waiting to reveal their secrets. And perhaps, like so many of Egypt's mysteries, this one will remain shrouded in uncertainty, a tantalizing riddle that beckons the curious, offering just enough to keep us wondering about what still lies buried beneath the surface. Far from the bustling cities of ancient Egypt, across the tranquil waters of the Persian Gulf, lies the enigmatic kingdom of Dilmun. A land lost to the annals of time, Dilmun was once a thriving and influential civilization. Far from the bustling cities of ancient Egypt, across the tranquil waters of the Persian Gulf, lies the enigmatic kingdom of Dilmun. A land lost to the annals of time, Dilmun was once a thriving and influential civilization, known for its strategic location between the civilizations of Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and the Arabian Peninsula. Yet despite its prominence in ancient trade and mythology, the kingdom of Dilmun is now a forgotten relic of history, its disappearance still an unsolved mystery. For centuries, Dilmun was referenced in the earliest written records of the ancient world. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, and the Babylonians all spoke of it with reverence, describing it as a prosperous land, often a paradise, untouched by death and disease. The name Dilmun itself evoked a sense of mystery and awe. It was said to be a place of abundance, a land where the gods dwelt, and where the underworld did not exist. In Mesopotamian myths, Dilmun was the home of the god Enki, and the place where the mythical hero Gilgamesh journeyed in search of eternal life. But where exactly was Dilmun? For centuries, scholars struggled to pinpoint its location. The answers came with the discovery of ancient archaeological sites on the island of Bahrain, which appeared to match the descriptions of Dilmun found in the Sumerian tablets. Excavations revealed an advanced society with well-planned cities, evidence of sophisticated trade, and a rich material culture that spanned from the early Bronze Age through to the Iron Age. The Dilmun civilization, it seemed, was a thriving hub in the ancient world, its merchants exchanging goods ranging from copper and lapis lazuli to textiles and spices. Yet, despite the evidence of its once great power, Dilmun vanished from the historical record as abruptly as it had appeared. By the first millennium BC, the kingdom was no longer a significant player in the geopolitical landscape. The reasons for its sudden decline and disappearance remain shrouded in uncertainty, with no single explanation emerging to account for its fall. One theory suggests that Dilmun's strategic position as a center of trade may have contributed to its eventual downfall. The island's prosperity made it a target for rival powers, particularly those from the powerful empires of Mesopotamia, such as the Babylonians and Assyrians. Could it have been the victim of a sustained campaign of conquest and subjugation? Archaeological evidence from the site of Dilmun indicates that the city was repeatedly attacked and rebuilt, suggesting that external pressures may have played a role in its decline. Others propose that environmental factors could have been the cause. Bahrain's climate, with its harsh desert conditions and limited freshwater resources, was always a challenge for its inhabitants. Over time, changes in the climate could have made it increasingly difficult to sustain the population, leading to a gradual decline. The rise of new trade routes and the migration of peoples could also have drawn away the kingdom's influence, leaving Dilmun isolated and forgotten. But perhaps the most compelling mystery lies in the sheer suddenness of Dilmun's disappearance. Unlike other ancient kingdoms whose downfall can be traced to specific historical events, Dilmun seems to have simply faded into obscurity. No major battle, no great destruction, no catastrophic event appears to explain its fall. The kingdom's disappearance seems as enigmatic as the civilization itself. As we explore the remnants of Dilmun, we are confronted with the haunting question of what happened to the people who once thrived there. What caused this once glorious civilization to vanish so completely from the historical record? And why did its influence on surrounding cultures, which had once been so pronounced, disappear without a trace? The archaeological record offers some tantalizing clues. In the ancient city of Qalat al-Bahrain, researchers have uncovered evidence of trade with distant regions, including pottery and inscriptions from the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia. The site's strategic location, near both the Arabian and Persian Gulf. One theory posits that Dilmun's gradual decline could have been linked to shifts in regional trade networks. As new maritime routes were established and the power of the Assyrian and Babylonian empires grew, the role of Dilmun as a key intermediary in trade may have diminished. Without the wealth that came from trade, the kingdom's political and military power would have waned, leaving it vulnerable to external pressures. Another possibility is that Dilmun's religious and mythological significance may have played a role in its downfall. The kingdom's association with the gods, particularly Enki and the notion of a paradise on earth, imbued it with a sense of otherworldliness. Some scholars have suggested that the kingdom's cultural and religious ideas were so entwined with its geographical location that, as those beliefs faded, so too did the influence of Dilmun. Could it be that the fall of Dilmun was not a result of military conquest or environmental factors, but rather a gradual shift in the cultural and religious landscape of the ancient Near East? And then there is the possibility that Dilmun's disappearance was simply a matter of time. Like so many other ancient civilizations, it may have been swept away by the tides of history, its once great cities and temples forgotten as new powers emerged on the stage. The rise of the Persian Empire, the dominance of the Parthians, and the eventual spread of Islam would all have contributed to the overshadowing of Dilmun's legacy. But perhaps the most unsettling question of all is whether there is more to the mystery of Dilmun's disappearance than we currently understand. Could there be hidden factors at play, religious upheavals, political conspiracies, or even a catastrophic event that we are still unaware of? The archaeological record is filled with gaps, and many of Dilmun's mysteries remain unsolved. As researchers continue to unearth the remnants of this once great kingdom, we are left with the unsettling possibility that some answers may remain forever beyond our reach. The story of Dilmun is a reminder of how fragile history can be, a civilization that once stood at the crossroads of the ancient world, now reduced to the whispers of myth and legend. What other secrets lie buried beneath the sands of Bahrain, waiting to be uncovered? What truths remain hidden in the ruins of Dilmun? And how much of this lost kingdom's story is still to be told? As we continue to explore the ancient world, we may find that some mysteries are destined to remain unresolved, leaving us to wonder what might still be lost to the passage of time. In the heart of the ancient Greek world, tucked between towering mountains and dense forests, lies a site shrouded in both legend and mystery, the Oracle of Dodona. Unlike the more famous Oracle of Delphi, which spoke through the words of a priestess, Dodona's oracle had a voice all its own, one that came from the trees themselves. For centuries, pilgrims from all corners of the ancient Mediterranean traveled to Dodona, seeking wisdom from the sacred grove of oak trees that stood at the center of the oracle's domain. The location itself was revered for its divine connection, nestled at the foot of Mount Tamaros, where the whispers of the wind were believed to carry the words of the gods. But what was it that the people of ancient Greece truly heard when they approached the oracle? Was it merely the rustling of the leaves, or something far more profound? And how did the voices from the trees guide the decisions of kings, warriors, and statesmen? The Oracle of Dodona was one of the oldest and most respected religious sites in the ancient world, mentioned as early as the 8th century BC in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. It was dedicated to Zeus, the king of the gods, and the sacred oak trees at Dodona were thought to be inhabited by the god himself. The priests of the oracle would interpret the messages they heard from the rustling leaves of the trees, the sound of the wind, and the movements of sacred doves that fluttered among the branches. These messages were believed to offer divine guidance on matters of war, governance, and personal fortune. At the heart of Dodona's mystery is the way in which these divine messages were delivered. The interpretation of the voices from the trees was not a simple affair. The priests would listen intently to the sounds made by the wind as it passed through the leaves of the oak trees. Sometimes the rustling would be accompanied by the cooing of doves, which were seen as sacred messengers of Zeus. The priests would then attempt to interpret these sounds. Each rustle, each flutter, each shift in the wind was believed to convey a divine message. But what exactly was happening at Dodona? Was it merely a form of natural acoustics, where the wind through the trees created sounds that, through the interpretation of the priests, became meaningful? Or could there have been something more mystical at play? Some scholars have suggested that the phenomenon at Dodona can be explained through natural science. The geography of the site, with its dense forests and mountains, could have created unique wind patterns, causing the leaves of the oak trees to produce certain sounds that could be interpreted in various ways. The specific acoustics of the site, coupled with the human tendency to seek meaning in randomness, might have allowed the priests to interpret the wind's sound as divine guidance. In essence, it could have been a form of ancient sound therapy or sound symbolism, where natural phenomena were perceived as communication from the gods. Yet, this explanation does little to satisfy the more mystical interpretations of the oracle's power. The people who came to Dodona believed that the voices from the trees were truly divine in nature, and the oracles were so highly regarded that even kings, including the mighty Croesus of Lydia and Alexander the Great, sought counsel from the oak trees. The ancient Greeks themselves seem to have been unsure whether the oracle's power came from the trees, the priests, or Zeus himself. Was it merely a matter of coincidence, or did something far more profound occur in that sacred grove? Adding to the mystery is the role of the sacred doves at Dodona. These birds were said to have been sacred to Zeus, and their movements were closely watched by the priests. In some accounts, the doves would appear to fly in certain patterns, or even land on particular trees, and these movements were seen as direct messages from the god. Was this an elaborate ritual based on observation and superstition? Or was there something more to the presence of these birds in the oracle's prophecy? One fascinating theory suggests that the oracle's power might have been linked to ancient knowledge of sound waves and resonance, potentially even an early form of acoustic engineering. It is known that certain places, such as caves or groves, have unique acoustic properties that amplify sounds in particular ways. Could the priests of Dodona have discovered these properties and used them to enhance their perception of the divine? The oak trees themselves, revered for their ancient and sacred status, may have provided a natural amplifier, enhancing the sound of the wind to create an experience that felt otherworldly to the ancient people. Moreover, some believe that the oracle's influence was more than just a matter of natural acoustics. The Greeks, known for their rich mythology, often portrayed their gods as actively intervening in human affairs. In this view, the rustling of the leaves and the sounds of the doves were not just interpretations of natural phenomena, but the literal voice of Zeus, speaking directly to the people. Could it be that the oracle's power lay in its ability to blur the lines between natural sound and divine intervention, creating a spiritual experience that was indistinguishable from the gods themselves? As with many ancient mysteries, the precise nature of the oracle's power may never be fully understood. Archaeological remains of the site, including inscriptions and the remains of the sacred grove, continue to offer glimpses into the practices at Dodona, but the ultimate truth of the voices from the trees remains elusive. The decline of the oracle in the 4th century AD, as Christianity spread through the region and the old gods were forsaken, left the site abandoned and forgotten for many centuries. Yet, the mystery of Dodona endures. What did the priests truly hear in the rustling leaves? Were they simply interpreting random sounds, or did they experience something transcendent, something beyond the realm of human understanding? And how did such a practice come to be so deeply ingrained in the culture of the ancient Greeks? The oracle of Dodona, with its haunting whispers carried on the wind, stands as a testament to the ancient world's belief in the power of the divine to speak through the natural world. Perhaps, in the silence of the ancient grove, we are left with the greatest mystery of all. Was the voice of Zeus truly heard in the wind, or did the whispers of Dodona carry with them something even more profound, the enduring human desire to connect with the divine? What secrets might still be hidden in the rustling leaves waiting for someone to listen? In the ancient world, belief in the supernatural was woven into the very fabric of daily life. Among the myriad gods, heroes, and spirits that shaped the course of human existence, there existed an unsettling practice, one that spoke not of divine blessings or favors, but of curses, revenge, and retribution. These were the Greek curse tablets, small, often crude inscriptions that seemed to carry with them the weight of ancient anger and fear. These tablets, discovered in sacred sites, graves, and even public spaces, are relics of a mysterious and deeply unsettling facet of ancient Greek society. They serve as a window into the darker corners of human nature, where desire for vengeance and the invocation of supernatural forces blurred the lines between the living and the dead. But what do these cryptic inscriptions reveal about the ancient world, and what can they tell us about the intersection of magic, religion, and belief in ancient Greece? The Greek curse tablets, known as Disappearance, were made of materials such as lead or occasionally bronze, and were often inscribed with messages invoking the gods, spirits, or the dead to punish a wrongdoer. These tablets, some as small as a few inches in length, were folded or rolled up and then buried or placed in graves, wells, or sacred sites, in the belief that their curses would be carried out by the supernatural forces invoked. They offer an eerie glimpse into a world where the power of words was believed to reach beyond mere speech and into the realm of the divine. The inscriptions themselves are often brief but chilling. They might read something like, "May this person be bound in the name of the gods, powerless to act or speak until their transgressions are repaid." Or, "I call upon the spirits of the underworld to deliver justice to the one who has wronged me." These are not mere pleas for divine favor, but demands for swift and often painful retribution. The curses typically targeted individuals who had committed some form of wrongdoing, whether in personal disputes, business transactions, or legal matters. It was not uncommon for the tablets to be inscribed in the name of a god, a goddess, or even a specific deity known for their power to punish, such as Hecate, goddess of witchcraft and magic, or Hermes, god of boundaries and transitions. Sometimes the curses were aimed at someone's health, wealth, or personal relationships, while other times they were directed at someone's very soul. At the heart of this practice was a deep belief that words could transcend the physical world and bind the very fabric of existence. To inscribe a name on a curse tablet and invoke divine retribution was to call upon a power greater than human law, a power that could not be undone by earthly means. For the ancient Greeks, this was not superstition or idle fear. It was a ritual that carried real weight in the daily lives of its practitioners. But how did these curse tablets work, and what did they reveal about ancient Greek society's understanding of fate, justice, and the unseen world? While some scholars argue that the tablets were simply a form of magic or personal grievance, a way for individuals to take justice into their own hands, the true motivations behind these curses remain complex and multifaceted. One of the most intriguing aspects of the curse tablets is the language used to express the curses. The words inscribed are often vague and metaphorical, invoking forces of the underworld, the gods, and the spirits of the dead. It's as though the person who created the tablet was reaching out into the darkness, trying to manipulate forces beyond human control. Was it the belief that these unseen forces would truly deliver punishment? Or was it the act of inscription itself that carried power? Could it have been that the curse tablet acted as a psychological tool, providing the person who created it with a sense of control over a situation that felt otherwise powerless? The physical placement of these tablets also raises fascinating questions. Many were discovered in places associated with the dead, graves, tombs, and burial sites, indicating that the ancients may have believed that the spirits of the deceased held power over the living. In some cases, the tablets were even buried near the bodies of the deceased, as though the dead themselves were being invoked to carry out the curse. In other instances, the tablets were placed at locations connected to the underworld, such as sacred springs or wells, where water was thought to have the power to purify or curse. The ancient Greeks believed that the boundary between the living and the dead was porous, and that by invoking the dead, they could call upon a force that would transcend the limitations of mortal existence. It's also noteworthy that the majority of these tablets were not simply pleas for vengeance. They were appeals to the gods for help in exacting punishment. This suggests that the people who wrote these curses believed in a highly interactive relationship with the divine. The gods were not distant, detached entities, but active participants in human affairs, capable of both blessings and wrath. To invoke them was to request their intervention in a world that often seemed out of control. However, while the curse tablets may have provided solace to the individuals who wrote them, they also raise unsettling questions about ancient Greek society. What does the widespread practice of cursing say about the culture's attitudes toward justice and revenge? Were these tablets a product of a society where personal grievances were often settled outside the bounds of the law, where the gods were called upon not only for protection and favor, but for vengeance as well? Some researchers have speculated that the proliferation of curse tablets may have been a reaction to the perceived failure of the legal system in ancient Greece. The public court system, while established, could not always be relied upon to deliver swift or fair justice, especially in cases where the laws were ambiguous or the offender had powerful connections. In such a society, where personal disputes could escalate into violent or ruinous consequences, the curse tablet may have been a tool for individuals to reclaim control over their lives and secure justice that they felt had been denied to them by earthly authorities. The most chilling aspect of the curse tablets is the way they suggest that the Greeks viewed justice itself. The curses on these tablets were not limited to the idea of righting a wrong or restoring balance. They often sought total domination over the accused. The idea of binding someone, rendering them powerless or insensible to reason, reflects a desire not just for fairness, but for absolute control. In this context, the act of cursing becomes an expression of deep anger and frustration with the limitations of human authority. Yet, despite the clear intent of the tablets to invoke divine retribution, there is no concrete evidence that these curses ever had the effect their creators sought. While some tablets were found near their intended victims, or even in locations tied to the accused, there are no records of people being punished by the gods in response to these curses. Could it be that these tablets were nothing more than symbolic gestures? A way for individuals to relieve their anger, frustrations, and sense of powerlessness? Or did they, perhaps, tap into a deeper, mystical aspect of the ancient Greek world, where the boundary between the real and the supernatural was never as clear-cut as we might imagine? In the end, the mystery of the Greek curse tablets is not merely a question of ancient rituals and beliefs. It is a question of how humans, throughout history, have sought to manipulate the forces of fate, to control the uncontrollable, and to seek justice through channels that lie beyond the realm of the physical world. What is it about the ancient Greek psyche that led them to turn to the gods and the dead? And what does this tell us about their understanding of power, justice, and the unseen forces that shaped their lives? And perhaps, most haunting of all, is the thought that some curses, whether ancient or modern, still have the power to echo through the corridors of time. What, if anything, do we believe today holds the power to bind or release us from the invisible forces that govern our world? Could the Greek curse tablets, in their haunting simplicity, still have something to teach us about how we seek to confront the mysteries of life and fate? Buried beneath the harsh winds of the Eurasian steppes, in the lands that stretch across modern-day Kazakhstan, southern Russia, and Ukraine, there lies a mysterious treasure, one that speaks of a people whose very existence once stirred both awe and terror in the ancient world. This treasure is not silver or bronze, but something far rarer, gold. Yet, the gold of the Scythians is not just precious for its material value, it is imbued with an enigma that has puzzled historians and archaeologists for centuries. The Scythians, a nomadic warrior people who dominated the Eurasian steppe for centuries, left behind a legacy that is both rich and mysterious. Their tombs, known as kurgans, have yielded astonishing artifacts, golden adornments, intricate jewelry, and finely crafted weapons that hint at a culture far more sophisticated than many initially imagined. But the true origins of these gold artifacts, and the people who created them, remain one of history's greatest mysteries. The most famous of these treasures was discovered in 1970 at the Pazyryk burial mounds in Siberia, far from the heart of the Scythian homeland. There, beneath layers of earth, archaeologists uncovered a wealth of gold objects, sculpted plaques, gilded vessels, and ornate pieces of armor, each piece more exquisite than the last. The artistry and detail of these objects were astounding, showing a mastery of craftsmanship that suggested the Scythians were not only warriors, but also skilled artisans, capable of creating objects of unparalleled beauty and complexity. But how did the Scythians, a nomadic people without written records, come to possess such advanced knowledge of metallurgy? Where did they acquire the skills to create these intricate works of art? And what drove them to fashion such stunningly beautiful objects from the raw material of gold? The first hint of an answer lies in the ancient history of the Scythian people themselves. The Scythians were not a single, unified tribe, but rather a collection of nomadic groups that shared similar cultural traits. They originated somewhere in the region of the Altai Mountains, near the confluence of the Irtysh and Ob rivers, and gradually spread across the vast expanse of the steppes, from the Caspian Sea to the Carpathian Mountains. Their rise to power coincided with the decline of the ancient Assyrian Empire, and for centuries, they were a dominant force in the region. These warriors were known for their fearsome reputation, their mastery of mounted archery, and their ability to conquer vast territories with a mobility that few could match. Yet, beneath the ferocity of their military prowess, there existed a highly developed culture, rich in ritual and art. This is where the gold comes in, because the Scythians did not just fight wars, they celebrated life and death through art, much of it cast in gold. One of the most striking aspects of the Scythian gold artifacts is their unusual designs. Many of the pieces depict animals, lions, stags, and mythical creatures, rendered in intricate, stylized forms that suggest a deep spiritual and symbolic significance. The motifs often blend human and animal features, suggesting a belief in the interconnection between humans and the natural world. These images are not merely decorative. They carry profound meaning, evoking the power and mystery of the animal kingdom and the divine forces that the Scythians believed inhabited the world around them. The artistry of these objects raises an intriguing question. Who were the people responsible for such intricate craftsmanship? Some researchers have suggested that the Scythians may have borrowed their artistic techniques from the Persians, whose empire was a powerful force in the region at the time. The Persians, with their advanced metallurgy and sophisticated artistry, may have influenced the Scythians, or perhaps even traded with them, introducing new methods of goldworking. It is also possible that the Scythians had their own indigenous traditions of metalworking, developed over centuries of contact with other cultures across the steppes. But there is another, more tantalizing possibility: that the Scythians were not the only creators of these stunning gold artifacts. Could they have been influenced by an even older, forgotten civilization, one that predates the Scythians themselves? Evidence of such a civilization remains scant, but the sheer complexity and skill of the Scythian goldwork suggests the possibility of a lost tradition, passed down through the ages by a long-forgotten people who left no written record. This theory has sparked the imagination of many historians and archaeologists, who have suggested that the Scythians may have inherited their knowledge of goldworking from an earlier civilization, one that might have existed in the remote corners of Central Asia or beyond. Could it be that the origins of the Scythian gold artifacts lie in a much older, more sophisticated culture, one whose legacy has been lost to the sands of time? And if so, what other secrets might this lost civilization have left behind? Some even speculate that the advanced goldworking techniques found in Scythian artifacts could have been influenced by contacts with civilizations from far beyond the Eurasian steppes. Ancient Persia and Greece, both of which were known to have advanced metallurgical skills, may have had trade routes or cultural exchanges with the Scythians. But the idea that the Scythians may have learned their craft from distant lands brings up the possibility of more mysterious connections. Could there have been links between the Scythians and ancient civilizations in the Mediterranean or even farther afield, such as the lost cultures of India or Egypt? This possibility opens up a fascinating line of inquiry. Could the Scythians' golden treasures be evidence of a much broader network of cultural exchange, one that spanned across the ancient world? If so, what other artifacts, long hidden beneath the earth, might reveal more about this ancient web of connections? Could the gold that adorned the Scythians be just one piece of a much larger puzzle, one that points to a lost history of the ancient world? There is also the possibility that the Scythians' gold artifacts are not just reflections of their artistic abilities, but of their spiritual beliefs. Gold, in many ancient cultures, was seen as a symbol of immortality and divine favor. For the Scythians, gold may have been more than just a material. It may have been a conduit between the mortal world and the divine. The lavish golden adornments found in their tombs and burial sites suggest a belief in the afterlife, in the idea that the gods would need these precious objects in the next life. The presence of gold in the graves of elite Scythian warriors could indicate that these artifacts were intended to accompany the deceased on their journey into the afterlife, where they would be protected and honored by the gods. Yet, despite the many theories, the origins of the Scythian gold remain elusive. While scholars have uncovered many pieces of the puzzle, the true nature of the gold and its creators remains shrouded in mystery. The sophisticated techniques, the symbolic motifs, and the sheer beauty of these objects point to a people whose artistic traditions were highly developed and whose beliefs were deeply intertwined with the divine forces of the world. But who were these people? And how did they acquire such extraordinary skills in metallurgy and craftsmanship? As we continue to unearth more of these golden treasures, the mystery only deepens. The Scythians, with their nomadic way of life, left behind few written records, making it all the more difficult to understand the full scope of their culture. And yet, through the gold they left behind, we are granted a glimpse into their world, a world that, like the glittering gold itself, remains just beyond our reach, a tantalizing enigma waiting to be fully uncovered. The question remains, what were the true origins of the Scythian gold artifacts? Were they the work of a lost civilization, or the product of a unique cultural development? And what other mysteries lie hidden beneath the earth, waiting to be discovered? The golden treasures of the Scythians continue to hold their secrets, secrets that may never be fully revealed. In the heart of the ancient world, where the echoes of empires rise and fall like the shifting sands, there exists a perplexing enigma, one that stretches back to a time before classical civilizations took shape. On dusty tablets and weathered stones, there are inscriptions, cryptic symbols, and strange writings that defy understanding. They do not fit the known scripts of any ancient language, yet they persist, whispering across millennia. These are the pre-classical anomalous inscriptions. Discovered across a variety of ancient sites, scattered from the deserts of the Near East to the distant coasts of the Mediterranean, these inscriptions offer a glimpse into a time when written language was still in its infancy. The symbols carved onto these stones and clay tablets represent something profound and mysterious. Their true meaning, however, remains tantalizingly out of reach. The first of these strange inscriptions was uncovered in the late 19th century at the site of Tel El Amarna, in what is now modern-day Palestine. In a modest temple, buried beneath centuries of rubble, archaeologists found a collection of broken clay tablets, each etched with symbols that seemed to defy any known script. The markings were neither Egyptian hieroglyphs nor Akkadian cuneiform. They bore no resemblance to any of the other written forms of the time. These inscriptions appeared to belong to a people whose language was entirely alien to the world that scholars knew. As archaeologists continued their work, similar inscriptions began to surface at other sites, from the ancient cities of Byblos and Ugarit to the sands of the Syrian desert and the hills of Anatolia. What had been discovered was nothing short of extraordinary. A series of seemingly isolated texts, each offering a cryptic puzzle for scholars to decipher. Some of these inscriptions were etched into stone, while others appeared on fragments of pottery and bronze artifacts. But the key feature of all of them was the sheer anomalousness of the script, symbols that bore no connection to any known language or writing system. The forms varied widely. Some appeared to be geometric shapes, while others resembled human figures or animal depictions. Some scholars have compared these symbols to early forms of writing, suggesting that they may represent an earlier stage of communication, predating more formalized scripts like cuneiform or hieroglyphs. But no one truly knows. So, who were the people responsible for these enigmatic writings? And why were they using such an unfamiliar script? Were these early scribes an isolated culture, or could these strange symbols represent a wider network of peoples now lost to time? To answer these questions, we must step back into the landscape of the ancient world, where writing was still a new and powerful tool. During the pre-classical era, civilizations were on the brink of creating permanent records for their ideas, laws, and histories. But the forms they used to communicate were still in flux. In some cases, these early writing systems were not fully developed or standardized. They were still experimental, emerging from the need to communicate complex concepts in an ever-expanding world. One of the most important discoveries related to these anomalous inscriptions came from the Levant, in the ancient city of Ugarit, on the northern coast of what is now Syria. In the early 1950s, excavations in this area unearthed a large collection of clay tablets, many of which were inscribed with strange symbols. These symbols had a certain resemblance to cuneiform, but were decidedly different in structure and form. They were arranged in a way that suggested a complex system of communication, but without a known key to unlock their meaning, scholars could only guess at their purpose. What stood out about the Ugaritic inscriptions was their combination of known and unknown elements. Some of the symbols clearly resembled letters from the Akkadian script, while others appeared to be unique creations. This led some to speculate that the Ugaritic people, like the early Scythians, may have been blending different linguistic influences, borrowing elements from various neighboring cultures, creating an entirely new script. While some researchers argue that these anomalous writings are simply an early, unrefined version of cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs, others point to more speculative possibilities. Could these symbols represent a lost language, a language that flourished briefly before being wiped out by the encroachment of more dominant civilizations? And if so, who were these mysterious people? Another intriguing aspect of the anomalous inscriptions comes from Palestine, where ancient tablets, including the Tel el Amarna letters, provide hints that some of these early cultures may have had a complex system of diplomacy and record-keeping long before the rise of classical empires. These tablets, which were sent between Egyptian pharaohs and the various rulers of Palestine, feature enigmatic symbols that suggest a cross-cultural exchange of ideas and writing systems. The Tel el Amarna texts, inscribed in Akkadian, the language of diplomacy, feature strange, anomalous markings that cannot be fully explained. These markings, though largely relegated to the margins of the more familiar cuneiform text, suggest that the scribes of the time were experimenting with new forms of expression. Some believe that these inscriptions are evidence of the emergence of a hybrid script, an effort to merge various writing systems into one cohesive form. But it is not only the Near East where these strange inscriptions have been found. Anatolia, located to the north of ancient Palestine, has yielded a number of enigmatic tablets covered in symbols that resemble neither Phoenician nor Hittite scripts. These symbols appear to be unique to the region, suggesting that the people of this area may have had a completely different written language, one that could hold the key to understanding a long-forgotten culture. And then there is the case of the Pictish inscriptions in Scotland, which some scholars have linked to the broader phenomenon of pre-classical anomalous writing systems. These inscriptions, etched onto stones and memorials, display an array of geometric symbols and animal depictions that suggest an entirely separate language tradition. Could these enigmatic symbols, found on the far edge of Europe, be part of a larger, prehistoric linguistic network that spanned from the Mediterranean to the British Isles? The mystery grows deeper still when we consider the possibility that these inscriptions were not merely linguistic in nature, but also spiritual or ritualistic. In the ancient world, writing was often used not just for practical communication, but as a means to invoke divine forces or to encode sacred knowledge. Could the strange symbols found on these tablets be the remnants of long-forgotten religious rites, encoded in a secret script that only the initiated could understand? Were these inscriptions part of a larger ritualistic practice, perhaps an early form of sacred writing meant to commune with the gods, or perhaps to preserve the arcane wisdom of an ancient priesthood? The challenge for modern scholars lies in the fact that many of these inscriptions do not fit neatly into any known linguistic category. Some are isolated fragments, others are incomplete, making it difficult to draw definitive conclusions about their meaning. The lack of a key, or even a consistent pattern, means that they remain unsolved, enigmatic pieces of a puzzle that stretches back thousands of years. As the years pass and new discoveries are made, the mystery of the pre-classical anomalous inscriptions remains as elusive as ever. Were these early peoples simply experimenting with early forms of communication, or did they possess a knowledge of writing that was ahead of its time, one that has since been lost to history? In the end, the story of these mysterious inscriptions is more than just a tale of ancient writing systems. It is a reflection of the broader unknowns of ancient civilization. What lost cultures, what forgotten scripts still lie buried beneath the sands, waiting to be uncovered? What other secrets might these ancient inscriptions be hiding, and what might they tell us about the civilizations that created them? The mystery continues, and the search for answers presses on. Amid the rolling hills and forests of the Balkans, in the heart of what is now Serbia, lies one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in Europe. Here, in a place known as Vinča, a discovery was made over a century ago, one that still baffles scholars and historians to this day. The site, now called the Vinča culture, was home to an advanced civilization that flourished thousands of years ago, long before the rise of Greek and Roman empires. At Vinča, archaeologists uncovered an astonishing array of artifacts, ceramic vessels, statues, and tools. But it was the symbols etched into the objects that would spark a mystery unlike any other. The Vinča symbols, as they are now called, are a series of abstract markings, geometric shapes, lines, and patterns that seem to defy explanation. These symbols appear on pottery, clay tablets, and even figurines, and they suggest the existence of a written language long before the established origins of writing in Mesopotamia or Egypt. The Vinča culture itself is shrouded in mystery. Although the people who inhabited this area between 6000 and 4000 BC are believed to have been part of a thriving, complex society, little is known about their language or their ways of communication. The symbols they left behind are their only known legacy, and yet, despite extensive study, scholars still cannot definitively explain what they mean. These mysterious symbols, there are over 200 of them, have been found on hundreds of different objects, but their purpose remains unclear. Some scholars suggest they could be a form of writing, an early attempt at recording information and telling stories. Others believe the symbols may have had a purely symbolic or religious meaning, perhaps connected to rituals or cosmology. The markings themselves are curiously abstract. They are not like the pictorial scripts of Egypt or Mesopotamia, nor do they bear resemblance to the well-documented early forms of writing found in Sumer. Instead, the symbols seem to be a hybrid, a mix of abstract art and early phonetic or logographic symbols. They are composed of simple geometric shapes, spirals, and lines that appear to be both deliberate and intricate in their design. Yet despite their consistency and prevalence across the Vinča region, there is no known key to understanding them. In fact, the absence of a known Rosetta Stone-like artifact, something to help decode the Vinča symbols, has made them a topic of intense debate among linguists, archaeologists, and historians. Some believe that these symbols may not be a script at all. Perhaps they were merely decorative, a form of symbolic art that held personal or spiritual significance for the people of Vinča. After all, many early cultures used symbols for ritualistic purposes, markings on sacred objects, amulets, and even tattoos, as a way to invoke divine protection or to record spiritual beliefs. But if these symbols were indeed a form of writing, as some scholars propose, then what does that say about the early development of language and communication? Could it be that the people of Vinča were far more advanced than we give them credit for? The implications of such a discovery would be profound. The idea that a society in Eastern Europe, long before the rise of written history in Mesopotamia, could have developed a form of writing would challenge everything we know about the origins of civilization. The enigma deepens when we consider the strange disappearance of the Vinča symbols themselves. While the symbols appear prominently in the early layers of the Vinča culture, they seem to vanish after a few centuries, disappearing around 4000 BC. What happened to the people of Vinča? Why did their language, or script, suddenly fade from existence? There are several theories as to why the Vinča script disappeared. One possibility is that the civilization experienced a cultural collapse. Similar to other ancient cultures, the people of Vinča may have faced environmental challenges, such as climate change or resource depletion, which led to the decline of their society. As their way of life crumbled, it's possible that their language and the script they used to record it was abandoned. Another theory suggests that the Vinča people were absorbed into the larger cultures of the region. By 4000 BC, neighboring cultures, such as those in Mesopotamia and the Aegean, were rapidly developing their own forms of writing, and it's conceivable that the Vinča people, over time, adopted these new systems of communication, abandoning their own symbols in favor of more standardized scripts. But what if the Vinča symbols were not abandoned, but rather lost to history? What if the key to unlocking the mystery of these symbols still lies hidden, buried beneath the layers of time and forgotten civilizations? Some theorists suggest that the symbols may have been deliberately erased, either by the people themselves or by later conquerors who sought to suppress ancient knowledge. In recent years, some researchers have even speculated that the Vinča symbols could be part of a lost global script, a precursor to the writing systems of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even Mesoamerica. If true, this would mean that the Vinča people were part of a much larger, far-reaching network of ancient cultures that shared symbols and ideas. This theory, while speculative, raises an intriguing question. What if the Vinča script was just one piece of a puzzle and the larger picture is yet to be uncovered? Even more curious are the parallels between the Vinča symbols and other ancient scripts. Some of the markings on Vinča artifacts have striking resemblances to symbols found in Indus Valley seals, which date from around the same time. Could the Vinča symbols be related to these distant cultures? And if so, what does this say about the extent of early human communication networks? The mystery deepens when we consider that the Vinča culture was not an isolated phenomenon. The civilization was part of the larger Starchevo-Kuras-Kris cultural complex, which spanned much of the Balkans and beyond. This wide geographic spread raises the possibility that the Vinča symbols could have been part of a regional or even interregional system of communication. If this was the case, the disappearance of the symbols might not be due to cultural collapse or adoption by other scripts. It could be the result of an intentional effort to erase the knowledge or a shift toward new methods of communication that we have yet to fully understand. The question remains, were the Vinča symbols an early form of writing that was simply too advanced for its time? Or were they something altogether different? A form of symbolic language lost to the ages, never to be understood? Could these strange markings hold the key to an unknown chapter of human history? As archaeologists continue to explore the site of Vinča and other ancient civilizations, the mystery of the Vinča symbols persists. What is clear is that the people of this ancient culture left behind more than just pots and figurines. They left behind a puzzle that has yet to be solved. And as with all mysteries of the ancient world, the answers may be closer than we think, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right mind to uncover them. In the heart of ancient legend, wrapped in mystery and wonder, lies the story of a remarkable object, a creation so fantastical that it transcends the boundaries of the known world. This object, known only in whispers and ancient texts, is called the Shamir, a mythical creature or tool of unimaginable power. And at the center of its legend, an extraordinary connection to one of the most iconic figures of the ancient world, King Solomon. The Shamir was said to be a creature or a substance capable of cutting through the hardest of materials, stone, metal, and even diamond. In some accounts, it is described as a type of worm or insect, while in others, it is a sacred tool of great divine origin, granted by God to Solomon himself. The story of the Shamir is one that has been passed down through generations, from the biblical texts to the writings of ancient rabbis, and even to the mysteries of medieval alchemy. But despite its centuries-old origins, the true nature of the Shamir remains elusive, a puzzle that continues to intrigue and confound. The Shamir first appears in Jewish mysticism and early biblical texts, particularly the Talmud and other ancient sources. According to these accounts, the Shamir was a tool used by King Solomon to build the Temple of Solomon, one of the most revered structures in the ancient world. The temple, said to be constructed without the sound of hammer or chisel, was a place of divine purity, and it was believed that the Shamir was used to carve the stones needed for its sacred construction. But what was this tool, or creature, that could cut through stone without a single strike? The Talmud presents various interpretations of the Shamir's nature. Some describe it as a type of magical worm, a creature with the ability to consume or destroy materials with its mere presence. Others suggest that it was a supernatural substance, possibly a mineral or a gem, imbued with divine power. In one particularly striking description, the Shamir is said to be a creature so powerful that it could not be captured by ordinary means, forcing King Solomon to keep it hidden away in a sealed vessel, only bringing it out when necessary to complete his sacred work. As with many ancient legends, the Shamir is shrouded in layers of symbolism and mystery. Was it a real object, an actual creature that existed in the physical world? Or was it a metaphor, a representation of the divine craftsmanship and wisdom attributed to Solomon, the biblical king who was known for his unparalleled knowledge and understanding of the world? The medieval alchemists took great interest in the Shamir, seeing it as a symbol of the power of transformation. In their writings, the Shamir was often associated with the creation of the philosopher's stone, a legendary substance capable of turning base metals into gold and granting immortality. For these alchemists, the Shamir represented the ability to transcend the ordinary and access the extraordinary. Some even claimed that it held the secret to unlocking the deepest mysteries of the universe. Yet, despite centuries of speculation and exploration, no physical evidence of the Shamir has ever been found. No ancient worm or divine tool has been unearthed in the remains of the Temple of Solomon or elsewhere. The legend persists, but the object itself remains elusive, like a mirage on the horizon of history, tantalizing yet just out of reach. Some scholars have suggested that the Shamir was, in fact, a form of early cutting technology, a type of diamond-tipped tool or a method of using extreme pressure to cut through rock. In ancient times, the ability to work with stone was a mark of great technological achievement, and it is possible that the Shamir was a tool or process so advanced for its time that it was regarded as magical or divine. Could the Shamir have been a type of lost technology, a precursor to modern cutting methods that has been lost to history? Others have proposed that the Shamir was not a physical object at all, but rather a symbol of divine wisdom and ingenuity. In this view, the Shamir represents the perfect blending of craftsmanship and spiritual insight, a manifestation of Solomon's unparalleled intellect. It was not a tool that could be held or touched, but a reflection of the sacred harmony that existed between the divine and the earthly. This idea suggests that the Shamir's powers were less about the physical world and more about the spiritual force that guided King Solomon in his monumental task. There is also the intriguing possibility that the Shamir was a metaphor for the divine spark, the mysterious force that drives creation and transformation. According to this interpretation, the Shamir was not an object at all, but a symbol of the wisdom and insight needed to shape the world around us. It may have been a representation of the divine inspiration that guided King Solomon in his work, a way of understanding the forces of nature and the cosmos. Yet even with these theories, the Shamir's true nature remains elusive. Was it a worm, a mineral, or a divine gift? Was it a physical object, or a symbol of something greater? The more we probe the legend of the Shamir, the more questions arise, and the answers seem as distant as ever. Perhaps the most compelling mystery surrounding the Shamir is its disappearance. According to legend, after King Solomon's death, the Shamir was lost. its powers and secrets vanishing with it. Some say it was hidden away, buried deep beneath the earth, while others believe it was stolen by enemies who sought to use its power for their own gain. Still, others speculate that the Shamir was deliberately destroyed, its knowledge and power deemed too dangerous to remain in the world. But if the Shamir was real, and it held such extraordinary powers, why is it that no trace of it has been found? Is it possible that the Shamir's true nature was so profound that it could not be understood by those who came after Solomon? Or could it be that the Shamir exists still, hidden somewhere in the world, waiting to be discovered by those worthy of its power? The legend of the Shamir worm, or tool, raises questions not only about the lost wisdom of Solomon, but about the very nature of divine knowledge and the mysteries that remain hidden in the corners of history. Was it a tool for construction, or a symbol of divine insight? Was it a physical object, or a metaphor for something deeper? The Shamir mystery, like so many ancient legends, remains unsolved. But as with all great mysteries of the past, the search for answers continues, driving our curiosity, challenging our understanding, and leaving us to wonder what secrets of the ancient world might still be.